Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, everybody. Are you in the Duzo? Morning, Dr. Fakudi. How are you, Madam Nora?
I'm fine, and you?
Excellent. Great. Glad to see you online.
Thank you.
So good morning, all the good people. So great seeing all the faces this morning on this cold morning, but I must say it's a bit less cold than yesterday. So that's showing us that it's going to be a good event again today. We're still admitting lots of people into the session. Thank you for your support. We really appreciate that. So while the people are joining, just some housekeeping. It's great actually nowadays to do housekeeping with Zoom platform because everybody's getting used to the platform. So we know what it's all about. A year or so ago, it was quite a thing still to find our way in Zoom and these virtual meetings, but nowadays it's going much better. All right, so ladies and gents, you can have a look at the bottom of your screen. You should see the participants box that you can click, and then you should see the other people, you know, on the event, and obviously you'll see your own names. You can mouse over your own name. You can rename yourself. Sometimes your device name is displaying, so you can rename yourself if you want to. Also, there's a chat room at the bottom of your screen. You can use the chat room to greet each other. I see the people are doing it there. Good morning, Ivan de Klerk. Great seeing you as well. So you can greet each other there. You're welcome to share contact details with each other. It's great. Please do not do promotional work there because we try and keep the focus on the topic of the event. But you're welcome to share your contact details and who you are and so on with people. That's what it's all about. Communication. All right, so remember that we kindly keep yourselves on mute so that you don't have too many background noises. We're all getting used to this virtual meeting, so once in a while should the dog bark. My little dog at the moment is lying right next to me, so that's how it works. But keep yourself on mute, and we will appreciate, you know, not having too much background noises. There are people following on YouTube. You're also welcome to text on YouTube your questions to the Transport Forum panelists, and we will make effort to also address your questions. We also do not encourage questions and answers during the presentations, ladies and gents, because we have the panel discussions, question and answer session that we can take care of that, so we can focus on the presentation. So what you can do is you can either in advance, you know, go to the chat room and you can type a question there for the panelists, or during the panel discussion, we will use the participants box. So you go to participants, and in the participants box, you can raise your hand. You can use that function, and then we can recognize you to ask a question, to unmute yourself and ask a question. We will give you opportunity to share your feedback. That's very important to us. We appreciate that you give us some feedback on the event. Also feedback in terms of what do you think future topics we should entertain at the Transport Forum. We really make use of that to know what's going out there in the industry and what you guys are experiencing so that we can address current issues and the challenges. So we really appreciate that. The presentations you see here today, those that's been made available, including 14 years worth of presentations, are available complimentary from the Transport Forum's website. And I would like to share my screen so that we can just have a look at those. So there is our program for the day, and our host today, Basil Govender, is going to introduce us to the presenters and so on a little bit later. But important thing to mention is that you've noticed that everything we do here is complementary. So you attending the events, the content on the website, everything complementary. So obviously we have somebody that valued sponsors that making this available for us and possible for us. So we really appreciate our sponsors. They are extremely important to us. And I would like to give recognition to our sponsors. So we've got great industry alliances with the Transport Forum. Those are the South African Association of Freight Forwarders, the South African Freight Parcel Association, SABOA being our host today, South African Bus Operators Association. We've got the African Industry Association and also the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport. These organizations have formally signed up with the Transport Forum to be associated with this platform. Obviously, there are other bodies as well collaborating, but they're not in a formal agreement with the Transport Forum. So really appreciate these organizations supporting the Transport Forum. Then we have media giving us lots of exposure, which is great. Got Freight News. Don't know if there's somebody from Freight News who want to say a few words perhaps this morning. Freight News also been known previously as Freight and Trading Weekly. It's about logistics news. And it will be really worth your while to subscribe to this magazine, online magazine. And we've got Africa magazine. They're giving us lots of support in terms of rail infrastructure news. Philippa Fox, Philippa Dean and her team, we really appreciate them. And then obviously we've got many other media houses supporting us, which we really appreciate. And they're actually getting the word out there for the Transport Forum, like Irma from Engineering News and so on. So we really appreciate you guys. All right, then University of Johannesburg. University of Johannesburg. I don't know if Prof. Jackie or somebody want to say a few words about University of Johannesburg. They've been part of the Transport Forum since the start that we started the Transport Forum more than 14 years ago. The Institute for Transport and Logistics Study. This was created within the Department of Transport and Supply Chain Management at University of Johannesburg in response to industry's need for independent, unbiased, relevant, and up-to-date research. And Prof. Jackie and Prof. Nalina and those people are mentoring me as well. I really appreciate their support. C-Track, somebody from C-Track perhaps want to say a few words.
Hello. Oh, as please. Go abantu mandla ungigezele
Harry, you are muted. Harry, you are muted.
Sorry, I don't know what happened there. Good morning. Thank you for warning me. All right, so let's go to Zutari. Anybody from Zutari want to say a few words? Zutari was previously known as Oricon. They've been part of the Transport Forum for about 7-8 years now.
Harry, sorry, I was muted.
morning.
So we, Zutari, are a multidisciplinary consulting, engineering, and advisory company. We operate in Africa and the Middle East, and we are very active in the transport industry, involved in all aspects of a project from inception all the way through to operations and closeout. We've been very proud sponsors of the Transport Forum for about 8 years and continue to support this great initiative.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Mike,
Harry,
for your support. We really appreciate Zutari being part of the Transport Forum. All right, then we have Global Trade Solution. Anybody from Global Trade Solution want to say a few words? Global Trade Solution, also GTS, is a user-friendly cloud-based international trade and supply chain solution that incorporates the core requirements to manage all activities around international supply chain in a compliant and cost-effective manner. GTS offers seamless integration with the various entities in the international supply chain, including the statutory agencies such as the customs authorities. And they've been part of the Transport Forum Gold sponsor now for their 3rd year already. Thank you to GTS. Huawei, somebody from Huawei, Yvonne, one of you guys maybe want to say a few words? All right, Huawei, they joined the Transport Forum as a gold sponsor this year. And they want to tell us very clearly that they're not only selling cell phones. Huawei's got great intelligent transport solutions. And Thomas Snake and them working also with Huawei has been the IT for Ekurhuleni before. And they're making life much interesting for us in the transport sector with the intelligent transport solutions. So thank you very much, Huawei. You can visit their website and you'll find lots of content there. But Air Cargo, they joined also the Transport Forum as a gold sponsor this year. And what they do is they offer various African passenger airlines and air freight services agreement to manage their underutilized cargo capacity, which is great. They will engage revenue for the cargo capacity which their cargo manages and makes available to the express parcel industry. They also develop other handling and marketing services for domestic and regional airlines. In 2014, but Air Cargo acquired the business of Imperial Air Cargo, which operates overnight freighter services in South Africa with a fleet of dedicated B737 freighter aircraft. Great having Bet Air Cargo as part of the Transport Forum. Thank you very much for your support. Right, Cuba. Anybody from Cuba want to say a few words? Seems to me, Mike, and you and me are the brave people this morning doing the work. Cuba's part of the Transport Forum also for many years as a gold sponsor, previously known them as VIX Technologies. They're delivering automatic vehicle collection solutions to many big metros in our country. And which is great about this is they're also doing integrated ticketing solutions, intelligent ticketing solutions. And it's much worthwhile to pursue what Cuba is doing. Thank you, Cuba, for your support. Standard Bank, Kathy Bell, perhaps online yet? Standard Bank joined the Transport Forum as a gold sponsor in October last year, but they've been actually involved with the Transport Forum for many years on an ad hoc sponsorship. They also, with Kathy Bell, also be involved in the road transport management system, adding lots of value to the transport sector in South Africa. They say, as a leading Africa-focused financial services organization, Africa is our home and we drive our growth. Thank you, Standard Bank. Easy Clear, somebody from Easy Clear. Easy Clear also joined this year as a gold sponsor. They provide the software and as a service to the freight forwarding, clearing and logistics community in South Africa and neighboring BLNS countries. They strive to ensure excellence through the expert team who understand the freight forwarding and customs clearing industry. They also forge strong relationships with SARS, South African Association of Freight Forwarders, IATA and TSPA to ensure that you, the client, are kept up to speed with industry development and changes. Thank you very much, Easy Clear. JC Auditors, Oliver perhaps online. JC Auditors also joined this year as a gold sponsor. They've got accredited certifications which are recognized globally. They work with clients and develop specific solutions. The goal is to provide professional, efficient, and simplified certification solutions, enabling clients to achieve their business goals. Definitely worth your while to make sure that you're in compliance and enable yourself to self-regulate. Good to talk to JC Auditors. Ubunye, maybe Vuji want to tell us a little bit more about Ubunye Capital.
Good morning, everyone. It's been quite a while since I joined the Transport Forum. I'm very happy to be back. Ubunye is a taxi industry focused advisory and research entity. I think we pride ourselves with the number of years experience in the taxi industry, as well as just the depth of our knowledge of the taxi industry. We look forward to engaging today, and thank you very much, Saboa, for the invitation.
Thank you, Vuji. Pride having you guys on board. Ubunye Capital has been a gold sponsor for the Transport Forum, I think, for 2 years already now. So thank you very much, Vuji. She also gives us lots of guidance, you know, in terms of integration in the public transport space. So thank you very much, Vuji, for all the work you're doing with the Transport Forum as well. All right, ladies and gents, let's give a big hand to all the sponsors. We really appreciate their support, and they are the people who are making the world possible for us. Yvonne, I see you unmuted. Do you want to say a few words about Huawei? Doesn't seem like that. All right, so as I said to you, the Transport Forum, the presentations presented at the forum over the past 14 years are uploaded to the website, complimentary, that you can download them. And that is the website. You can take note of that. And you can download. In other words, there are more than 900 presentations. It's one of the strongest knowledge bases in the public transport sector, I think, in Africa. You know, so you can download these presentations complimentary, and you can use a very simple little search engine to do that. What you do is when you visit that website, transportseek.com, when you visit that website, then you'll see to the left of your screen a user login where you log in. We enforce that because obviously we need your contact details to keep you posted in the future, and we protect our data. So we only use of registered users accessing the presentations. Excuse me, should you not have your account with the Transport Forum yet, then you can create your own complimentary account by selecting sign up, which will take you through a simple little registration process, and you can sign up to have your own username and password. Once you've logged in, then you go to events, you select downloads, excuse me, and then After you've selected downloads, then you have this little search engine. So in that title or description, you just type a person's surname or a date or a topic, and it will search through all the presentations over the past 14 years for your search. Or you can go to category and you can select it today's date, for example, and it will bring up all the presentations made available during today's event. So great, you can download, and let's get the process of transport improved in Southern Africa. Take note of our business directory, very popular. The business directory, we're getting great feedback from companies being listed here, and you can see it's well categorized, and you can see it's been outsourced to Olga Mashilu, Bontle consultant. There's Olga's number. Take note of that number. It's only 450 rands per year. It's not really a lot of money, but that's Olga is administrating this for us, and we really appreciate the hard work she's doing. Also, in the feedback that you will receive after this event, you will give an opportunity to indicate whether you want Olga to contact you and to get your company listed, or you can give her a call and she'll help you to get your company listed in a Transport Forum business directory. So let's then get to our program of today, and we're talking public transport violence avoidance. It's the 17th of June 2021, and I would like to hand you over to our host for today, Basil Govender. I'm going to stop my share screen so that we can see Basil for a moment, and then I'll put up the program again for Basil. Thank you very much, Basil.
Thank you, Harry. Good morning, everybody. Welcome, and yeah, thanks again for your time and attendance today. Good intro there, Harry, and thanks for allowing us again to be hosted on your platform. So let's get stuck in, people. Where does one start? Violence, intimidation, protest action, destruction. These things within our society are not necessarily a new phenomenon. But within the public transport space, though, this has been an underlying issue that has not been dealt with over the years. And a number of conflicting ideologies, coupled with competing and conflicting interests, have been developing, and this is creating an environment for, if you want to be extreme, rogue elements to thrive, whilst regulatory processes seem to be falling by the wayside or the side of the road, if I have to use that pun. So, over the last years also, market forces have also seen drive for profits and sustainability come into direct clash with policymakers' attempts to regulate and develop public transport going forward, whilst also trying to improve road safety. Then sitting amongst all of these things, we've got service delivery constraints at a macro and micro level, and sometimes non-essential services not being to the standard they are. I've seen the public transport sphere caught up in various forms of protest actions for communities. So with all that in mind, solutions can't be crafted in one morning online, but I thought it was critically important as industry role players for us to have a robust engagement, move towards a solution-driven strategy that is inclusive of all stakeholders, and if anything, it will enable dialogue and focus on a serious matter that requires decisive governance from all parties, let alone government. So today is the start, and I seriously urge everybody to look at this with an outcomes-based approach, not a pointing approach. It's a start to perhaps taking us towards a formal discussion document and or a strategy policy discussion down the line. So briefly, as you know, SABOA is the industry association that represents at large the bus and coach industry, but we are also actively engaging all stakeholders towards a more modern and inclusive industry, and it includes pretty much now high up the agenda, influencing and or shaping policy where it's applicable. So myself, Basil Govender, I'm the executive manager at SABOA, and I lead the secretariat team that represents the industry members. This morning is one of a series or calendar of webinars we have in tandem with and in collaboration with the Transport Forum. So watch out for the industry specific ones, and we look forward to having you on board on those as well. Harry spoke to a little bit of building knowledge base and retaining knowledge base. One of the key challenges in the transport sector and the public transport industry is data set, data integrity. Putting together today's forum exposed some of those challenges in trying to get quantums, trying to get numbers and statistics. But I think the panel we put together today, our panelists will be broadly representing the municipality levels, national government level. We have the SOE in PRASA. We've got an independent outlook from Rui at the modal challenges within the taxi industry, covering a community thought process around violence, and then wrapping up with a view from the South African Police Services on behalf of government on how to keep this industry safe and free from violence going forward. And hopefully we will stimulate you to engaging in crafting a solution, all of us. So once again, thank you for your attendance and participation. As Ari said, make use of the chat function to comment or raise any queries. And otherwise, as you can see, we've got 2 Q&A sessions lined up. You can fall in line with that. So getting into the program for today, to get us started, our first panelist or presenter is Mr. Neil Aransa. He's the Acting Director for Public Transport Regulations. He's also managing transport enforcement and public regulations within the transport at the City of Cape Town. Neil has over 2 decades of experience, years of government. He has a bachelor's degree in policing and a postgraduate diploma in project management. He left the South African Police Services as a police superintendent, a lieutenant colonel in today's terms. He then relocated, as everybody in government seems to want to do these days, relocated to Cape Town, taking up the position as Assistant Chief in Cape Town's Law Enforcement Services. And more recently, he now manages the city's public transport enforcement branch, and further acting as Director of Public Transport Regulations. So Neil will kick off the presentation on using the PDIA approach in identifying potential solutions for violence avoidance. And hopefully we can all take some lessons out of this. Thanks, Neil. Welcome. And you.
Basil, thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to come and share with you this morning. Just allow me to upload my screen. All right, can everybody see my screen?
Perfect, thank you, Neil.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Today, as I said, I will be speaking to you on using PDIA to identify a potential solution against bus commuter-directed crime on behalf of the City of Cape Town here at the Transport Forum. Just a quick overview. Obviously, I will be touching on background and introduction, just having us understand why we are doing this. Explaining the PDIA in short, looking at the problem analysis and description of what we had to do to get to where we are, share with you some progress thus far. also critical for us, the benefits of the PDIA approach, why we find this has been very advantageous for us. Revisiting the fishbone again and why you will see we do that. And then having a look also at potential countermeasures that we've identified for rollout within our environment as well. Just with background and introduction to share with you that this project obviously, or this approach, has been driven by the Office of the Premier. The Western Cape Province has established different PDIA teams, and I am on one of these teams dealing specifically with bus commuter safety. And that was to address what was seen as relatively complex challenges facing our city and overall our province. Golden Arrow bus services, albeit on a much higher scale, we understand, were experiencing, or are in fact experiencing, similar safety risks as Cape Town's My City bus services on some of their routes, causing obviously commuter fear, and as we all know, damages to assets, which relates to burning of buses that we've seen in the news, that we've seen in the media all over the place. It is against this backdrop that the Western Cape Province identified Golden Arrow bus services as an entry point for usage of the PDIA method, with their focus obviously being on improving safety of commuters. That's just in short. So what is PDIA? And I have a short clip that I just want to share and have this run so that we can just understand what PDIA really then is. Oh, just give me a second. There we go.
In the Building State Capability Program, we believe most development problems are complex, and solving them requires a step-by-step approach. We call this process Problem-Driven Iterative Adaptation, or PDIA. PDIA is not about delivering prepackaged solutions. Instead, we begin by identifying a problem that matters. A local team then gathers to break the problem down into its root causes, identify entry points, and quickly take action. As we go, the team regularly pauses to reflect and adapt. As good ideas sprout naturally, they start to grow and spread. Complex problem solving is a journey of discovery that allows the emergence of skills and solutions. It's about building capability by delivering results. To learn more, visit our website.
I hope that in short is just a short explanation of what the PDIA is thus about. So we've learned that it is a step-by-step approach which helps you to break down your problem into its root causes, really identifying, having causes that we identify and sub-causes to the causes at the end of the day. We then identify entry points to where we can actually try to enter and have the authority, the ability to bring about the necessary effect that we would want. We search for possible solutions that can be deployed. We then take action, reflect on what we've learned. Has it worked? Has it not worked? And then we adapt and then act again. And that is the iterative adaptation portion of the problem-driven approach then as well. So we've learned already that the process relates around deconstructing the local problem. And what I like about is the fact that it is the local problem. It is not we are trying to see what for example, the USA has done or Brazil has done or what has happened in Europe. It's really looking at our unique problem here in our local environment, deconstructing that specific problem for us, and then obviously identify action steps, act on them, take stock. Has it worked? Has it not worked? Sustain the authority and legitimacy for what we are trying to do, and then adapt and iterate again. And it's that cycle that is a continuous process, trying to get to good solutions at the end of the day. With a problem analysis and description, we'd like to share with you the problem statement we had for ourselves was commuter bus operations and their passengers, which obviously are unsafe as they've been subjected to increased attacks over the last few years. We looked at Golden Arrow's data and we found that in 2020 alone, Golden Arrow has experienced 224 robberies. That is a serious figure. And obviously having had 102 million rand in damage to the company for the 2020 year period, which is very, very significant. We looked further, and in 2021, from January to May alone, they've already experienced 68 armed robberies again. That's tantamounts to an average of 5 incidences a week, which is critical and very significant. And we had to find, how do we find entry points? What causes this? How can we try to understand what is wrong and what can be rolled out as a solution for this? The program is that we have gone and identified the various causes that we have seen as things that we need to focus on. So initially, we identified through utilization of a fishbone diagram the various headings that we need to focus on, which is issues such as policy. Do we have correct policy in places that challenge with policy, institutional coordinational challenges, funding challenges, if there is a need for us to roll out anything. We identify technology, for example, as a problem. We look at various other issues like societal issues, communications, legal problems that there might be. And obviously we found through our analysis of the data that it's quite sector bound, where most of these incidences are occurring. We had further discussions and consensus building with various departments within provincial government. We've engaged national government, we've engaged local government and other spheres and other organizations as well. Transport has been one of our key engagement role players in this regard. We've engaged with the South African Police Services, obviously Golden Arrow bus services, from management to area managers, all the way down to having a focus group discussion with bus drivers themselves. We engaged with My City, we engaged obviously with the Metropolitan Police CCTV section, as well as the Safety and Security Strategic Information Management Services. We've engaged them to try to grasp the problem from first-hand information that we can obtain, and then validate the exercises that we are affecting. We've looked at robbery cases in the area to try to identify where the biggest problems are. In Cape Town, for example, we identified it to be in Philippi, as you can see, with a 30.2% highest average or highest percentage of robberies per area, and Khayelitsha leading with 28.1. So we could identify where to, if there is any sort of solutions that we can roll out, where to focus them, that we don't focus them where it's not necessary, to try to have a positive outcome. We looked further to a pattern analysis, identified which times of the day it's most problematic, it occurs most frequent. We also did an analysis on which days of the week, obviously, and further I created a heat map to identify which routes specifically are the most problematic, and that also stood out in the same way that this specific portion of time stands out clearly in this diagram. We are now, as it stands, on the 76th iteration of this fishbone. As we say, we keep on working at it, asking more questions. Why is this the case? Why is this? How? And that leads to changing and reworking the fishbone. That we are at the 76th iteration already of that, and ready to start rolling out things. So we've really put a lot of work into this, and we are excited about getting to a stage where we can start looking at rolling out some of the solutions that we believe might work for us. What are the benefits of the PDIA approach for us? the fact that it's not a prepackaged solutions, that for us was the biggest hallmark here. It is problem driven as opposed to solutions driven. The PDIA methodology seeks to understand the problem in great detail, as opposed to the solutions driven model where we all went into a room and started seeing, maybe we should do this, maybe we should do that. And that was just developing solutions, assuming the solutions will work. We didn't necessarily know they would. So with a problem-driven approach, the PDIA method, it really, although time-consuming, but it really has you work down to understanding the problem in very great and minute detail. And it works towards solutions without making any assumptions. We really don't want to just roll out for the sake of, but we want to know that we've really touched on the nerve of the problem, and we can try to roll out solutions towards that. So revisiting the fishbone, what we have found was, with regards to issues of institutional coordination, we found that there was poor coordination. We determined stumbling blocks to rolling out, for example, recruitment. If we want to recruit staff to start helping out with enforcement on the routes, that was obviously due to funding being of a temporary nature. And this sort of discussions allowed us to then proactively discuss mitigation potentials for what we are trying to achieve. Internal bus service procedures, we've had a discussion with that through our focus groups, and we found that it could potentially be creating disgruntled employees. And this obviously, as we know, could breed a culture of revenge, and we don't want that. We do not want an environment where we have to not only fight external risks, but internal risks as well. And therefore, these are things that we've identified by really diving into some of the issues that could influence risks towards Golden Arrow bus services. With regards to the spatial sector, we found that there is a lack of safety on some of these corridors. The neighborhood watches that are, for example, in place predominantly operate during the evenings, and that's not when our buses are being exposed the most, as our diagrams have shown. So there, for example, we identified is a challenge. We looked at road conditions through our engagements with GABS and the South African Police Services. We found that some of the road conditions are such that it causes the buses to slow down on certain routes. They can't go fast enough. And that allows opportunities to be stopped and to be robbed as well. So these were some of the root causes that we also identified, that we've then rolled out interventions for, to try to see if we can do that. And if that would have a positive impact for us as well. With information systems, we found that there is poor apprehension within the environment, a poor conviction rate, and that with engagements with the South African Police Services, we found was due to lack of witnesses or loss of witnesses. Some witnesses get intimidated and they withdraw cases, or they no longer want to take part in this. We've also found that witnesses struggle describing actual suspects, normal things like did he have a mustache or not? Did he have a beard? Yes, no. What was the color of his pants? Because we found in certain communities that those criminals don't necessarily change their clothing a lot. So you might say it was an individual black jeans with a red jacket. You might find black jeans with a red jacket individual within the community. So those descriptions were very important, and we shared that forms part of how we will then communicate and help our communities. A potential countermeasure we've also identified was the establishment of an enforcement unit dedicated to preventing and responding to crime incidents on the Golden Arrow bus service routes, and trying to also look at issues of arson, assault, and robbery then overall within the environment. With public transport, there was discussion around potentially the minibus taxi industry competition that could create problems. We had a discussion around that. their potential involvement, and we will do some more research into that and see whether there could be a justifiable link that we can then engage with the necessary role players on that. What specifically is targeted, we had a discussion on that, and what can be improved upon through our iterations. And we identified as a potential countermeasure target hardening, for example, of our bus fare box within the buses. So we've identified that's something we can have a quick entry to and try to roll out a solution for that. With regards to technology, we found that there's either no limited or the wrong technology rolled out on the buses. So there was a discussion on lack of CCTV all round, and that we also drew from engagements with passengers and commuters. And we identified through perception surveys that have indicated that commuters actually feel safer if they believe that they are being watched. There's somebody seeing. So if anything goes wrong, somebody is seeing it and will respond. And that sort of gives them a sense of safety. So you can imagine that there was then a long discussion on technology and in-depth discussion on what is needed, what would work. We spoke about deploying saloon cameras at the entrance, cameras that can view the entire bus, panic buttons for the bus drivers. We had discussions on how this will be recorded back at base, whether it'll be live stream, whether it'll just be recorded streams. We looked at automatic number plate recognition that could also be rolled out. And we had in-depth discussions about technology. Communications, we have identified that communication is unclear, and it was critical that there were worldviews that need to change, and we need to incorporate that in our communication strategy. Buses were seen as a soft target. Bus attacks were seen as victimless because when they attack the bus is normally empty, and they feel that there's no victims at the bus, so it's a victimless crime in that sense. And there's a view insurance will cover it anyway. And buses are seen as an extension of government. So if we are upset with government, then we will attack the bus because the bus is seen as extension of government. We had a discussion on socioeconomic issues, substance abuse, for example, high levels of school truancy, gang activity within the areas. And we have had an engagement with UCT and a study that we looked into specifically relating to the Kailicha area. It was found that methamphetamine is a huge problem there, and there were focus groups that were held with some of the criminals that made themselves guilty of robbery. And these individuals explain that they literally get up in the mornings to start robbing the people on their way to work because they need to get their fix for the day. And after they had their fix, towards the afternoon, when they come off of the high, they get ready again to start robbing the people that return again from work for their fix for the evening. So these are all sort of things that we engaged with and tried to understand and see how best we could identify solutions to be rolled out for that. Potential countermeasures that we've identified, as I have alluded to earlier, is that we are considering the rollout of enforcement on our buses, on our bus routes, looking at the technology that we will roll out on the buses as well, the CCTV, our awareness campaign, our communication strategy, looking at how best we can also help the people identify suspects, describe them to the police, and really encourage them to form part of what police requires to have positive prosecutions in the end to prevent reoccurrences, looking at neighborhood watch to be there during the day where that is available, and having a good engagement between management of Golden Arrow Bus Services and bus drivers, that those unnecessary issues can also be sorted out. A transport system we see is related and interdependent within its environment. And therefore, for us, it made a lot of sense that one solution alone was not going to solve this complex problem. So we were looking at a basket of initiatives then that can be rolled out. but the required focus was still on reducing opportunities of crime, making targets less desirable, increasing the likelihood of being apprehended, and then having positive and prosecutions and outcomes in that regard, and then improving on awareness, the potential displacement of this and the diffusion measures. We also considered that we might be rolling it out on this route, and then it might displace the problem to another route. We had discussions around that as well. But we understood that it can no longer be it's the bus industry's problem, and it's not mine. It's a situation of me and you need to become us, and really start understanding that in the city of Cape Town, for example, the bus services industry is part of our integrated public transport network, and we need and we view it as such, and therefore try to see how best we can help. It might look like a very complex and very tantamount problem for us to achieve, but I'm always reminded of Francis of Assisi that said, start doing what is necessary, then do what is possible, and suddenly you are doing the impossible. I just love that. Together, I believe that we can. And on that note, I thank everybody for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Neil. Excellent, excellent, excellent start. I think that just encapsulates the tone, the thing we wanted to raise today. And then the key takeaways. I mean, the first point you started with, complex. I think we're going to find that throughout today. And I'm hoping that all our colleagues online and everybody understands the complexities. So we are ultimately seeking solutions, but we've got to deal with the problems first. And we'll hear a lot about problems coming up. But if I have to say you've gone through 76 iterations, then I think you are our new best friend, City of Cape Town, Mr. Aransa and Golden Arrow, because you've basically done this 76 times. So we're not going to reinvent the wheel. You'll listen to our problems and concerns as we raise them now, and you'll nod your head saying, yep, heard that one, yep, heard that one. So bear with us if we tend to bore you, but from a broader industry point of view, we are certainly way behind. And from a broader stakeholder point of view, we are absolutely behind the ball game. So we're going to look to the City of Cape Town. Thank you very much, Neil, for a super presentation.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Oh, it says I'm next up, Mr. Harry. Did you move me up the list? Okay. Am I good to go with screen sharing?
Looking good.
Okay. Thank you, folks. So yeah, that's
Basil, sorry to
very
interrupt.
graphic.
Maybe you can just go to view and full screen.
Yeah, I've got it on PDF. Maybe let me just put the actual presentation up. Give me a sec, Harry. How are we doing now?
Perfect, perfect. You can continue.
Okay, thank you, folks. So yeah, from a bus industry point of view and the broad industry per se, it was staggering numbers that Neil quoted there, just on one operator. Unfortunately, as I've said, the industry is its own worst enemy in terms of keeping a good data set. But I'll try and give you the high level view from an industry point of view. This presentation will create a bit of a preamble. It will talk to a document that I'm very big on focusing at the moment, and I've extracted from the National Household Transport Survey issues around safety and security. then talk you through some of the bus industry concerns in a generic form, and what we'd like to start seeking out through this potential PDIA process, if we can, how to put together a violence avoidance strategy that looks at the problems and works towards solutions, and then what next steps, and a bit of a closing summary. So kicking straight in then, public transport, as it's often mentioned, and any discussions you take in webinars you go to, policy documents, the extract to provide safe, affordable, and accessible transport always comes through. So is this but a dream, or can it be sustainably achieved? We'll have to look and impact on the sustainable public transport going forward. So the definition in the NLTA says public transport is defined as a scheduled or unscheduled service to passengers by road or rail, whether subject to a contract or not, and where the service is provided for a fare or any other consideration or reward charge in respect of Passengers Cross-Border Act. So this is pretty much carrying policies. So taking from that, what can we say? Public transport is now a key driver within the SA social and economic landscape, and therefore plays a crucial role not only to the mobility needs, but also contributing to development within the economy. Sustainable public transport, however, cannot afford, and nor can it withstand any impacts on assets, infrastructure, route networks, and service provision. These have direct and correlated impacts on the sustainability, on the profitability, and the viability of an already constrained public transport operating system. But unfortunately, due to the lack of attention to these causes and the effects of violence, destruction, and intimidation, it does appear that the networks and the bus industry in particular is being eroded. So continuing that theme, we keep saying provide safe, affordable, and accessible transport. We also hear integration of public transport in any discussion. However, in fundamental issue impacting and the development of transport system afforded to the causes of dissatisfaction that's in varying levels amongst our stakeholders. Not to do much on it, but it's been well documented that some of the apartheid era transport systems, the spatial planning, the demographic. Yes?
Basil, sorry to interrupt. Can you maybe switch off your video? We've got a bit of bandwidth problem from your side.
Oh, my apologies there, Harry. Just a sec. I need to find my...
And go to the top of your screen. You'll see there should give you there. There we go.
All right. Have I killed myself? My apologies. And I've got a scratchy throat. Yep. Thanks. So, the culture of violence was rooted in the policies of the era that we come out of. And as a country, we're still facing those demons. So in dealing with any dissatisfaction on service and expectations of service, violence and destruction are almost daily phenomenon dominating our news. But notwithstanding these issues, within public transport, there's ongoing strife and tension, and this is brought about by the disparity in public transport funding. So that leads to subtle and overt modal conflict need to survive within the different sectors. The support and the multi-governmental scrutiny, and its complexity. That's a word that Neil used as well, of the environment. And unfortunately, in a large part, the approach has been rather one that parties affected should resolve mess between themselves rather than a strategic intervention. Excuse me. So quickly pulling out related issues out of the National Household Transport Survey for 2020. These are security-related extracts. Table 710 that dealt with crime and perceptions of crime. Whilst other problems that were not as important nationally, but that had significant percentages of complaints at the provincial level, crime in the Western Cape, and it's 10.1% highest, with Free State coming in at 5.1 second. Then on table 711, how safe do you feel from crime? The Western Cape and Eastern Cape are the provinces that were significantly more households that found crime was a more important than safety from accidents. Tells you a whole lot that if you rate security from crime higher than safety from accidents. And then the one that also pulled out, dissatisfied with bus services from those who used it. Again, talking the security issues. The security on the walk to and from the bus stops, national percentage, 31. Security at the bus stop, 34%. And security on the buses, 22.5%. Key attributes that were most associated with dissatisfaction for buses. So as I've said, the industry has not been very good at reporting and documenting incidents that impact on the ability to render safe and reliable services. So it often creates, and Neil also kind of alluded to it, it creates the impression that the bus industry is not that bad affected. It only comes to the fore in major incidents covered in the media or in the mainstream news. So added to this, the lack of centralized reporting systems where we can collate national data is non-existent. And the cocktail of social issues leading to the bus industry facing severe challenges. And what are those? So we choose to raise the following concerns broadly. 3 areas of concern for the bus industry. They center around intermodal strife and intimidation, social unrest and collateral damage from protest actions or community actions, and escalating crime levels. So a slight tap into each one. So when it comes to intermodal strife and intimidation, call it what it is. Legitimate operations and legitimate operators cannot be bullied out of long-standing services by somewhat illegitimate and non-compliant operators. That cannot happen. We have specific entities that are tasked to deal and manage these areas and environments. The National Public Transport Regulator at a national level and a provincial level, the provincial regulatory entity. Their functions, the NPTR is required to keep information of all associations, members, operators in relation to interprovincial transport and on the routes operated. They're also empowered to issue written requests to the PREs, and the planning authorities, those that are not fulfilling the obligations under the Act, or as an alternative, they may request the minister to issue directives in that regard. So why am I hopping on this? It's because at a provincial level, the PREs are supposed to be keeping specified information as above for the provinces and must use this information to manage the issuing of operating licenses within a broader public transport environment. Now, to contextualize one impact for the industry, Sabah has a member called an operator, Molaba Ork Coaches. He operates the Gauteng Popo route. he has had a protracted battle with no resolution on intimidation and violence for 20 straight years. Several court cases, major losses, including an employee letter, remains unresolved on the route between Limpopo and Gauteng. And as such, cattle operators are freely operating this route with impunity. We have a similar situation to a long-standing operator running the Free State to Lesotho road. Just no assistance and no resolution on it. So if we go on to social unrest and community protest action, I think everybody knows and sees this. It's not a new phenomenon, but buses are now really seen as an easy target for communities experiencing service level issues or non-delivery. So burning a bus to vent dissatisfaction is an easy way out and is on the increase. Not only from buses being burned, but when there is protest action, buses en route are vandalized and stoned. We had an incident in lowly Johannesburg in the height of protest action, coupled with criminal action. A driver was shot and he was burnt in full view of the community. So, countrywide, there are daily issues of community unrest and protest that results in unsafe and danger to passengers. From a crime point of view, the levels of crime, vandalism, and violent protests are escalating, both nature and frequency. En route crime is on the increase. Neil tabled some of the stats. The major and concerning trend is that the increased number of incidents where commuters are hostage and robbed whilst traveling on the buses. Again, it appears that gangs are targeting commuters as soft targets, and also the perception exists that cash collection on buses is quick access to cash. He gave you some very staggering numbers in terms of the incidents for Golden Arrow. And then ultimately, I think from an industry point of view, facilities. There's a general lack of sustainable maintenance and upkeep of public transport facilities, coupled with the fact that through the years, there's been a gradual takeover of what we would call traditional bus facilities over the years by the taxi industry. This is now developed almost into extortionist practices and regulation of loading by a taxi industry. So one only needs to frequent the Baragwanath and Faraday termini in Johannesburg and look at the Bosman station in Pretoria and check the evolution from what used to be a traditional bus node into a non-existent public transport facility. In all of these, the lack of security compounds process, dereliction of facilities, and ongoing vandalism is rife. So to contextualize how an industry can hold another industry to ransom, this is a publication of a meeting taxi operators at said venue, called by the taxi operators, the matters to be discussed. Timetable: all bus operators should be out of Mthatha by no later than 1500 in order to give taxi operators space to partake in the market. Now, you can't get any more clear and any more brazen than that. Bus operators will be inspected to ensure they have valid permits. All operators should only operate one bus per company. And then, as if that's not enough, we then get into the process of price fixing and determining the fares. So this one incident can project to a broader industry problem in terms of where modes pitted against each other, but from a governance point of view and a decisiveness point of view to deal with the matter, it doesn't happen at all tiers of government. So the view is that they need to solve the problems between themselves. Okay, so having said all of that, why a violence avoidance strategy? Some of the things Neil has covered already. There are a number of reasons why understanding and preventing crime on public transport should be important to all of us. But most importantly, it's because public transport plays a role in promoting social inclusivity and providing access for mobility. There is limited or no information available as to the levels and extent of crime and violence within this space, and where it does exist, there seems to be discrepancies. And we can attribute that to a couple of reasons. Critically, there is a disconnect between various tiers of government authorities, and they also use different systems to record and report incident management. There's a lack of accountability as to where this particular issue should holistically reside. As I said, limited to no studies on this matter, and thus far the academic investment in the totality is not as great as other areas of study. There's a potential complexity of data and analysis if and when we collect data. And I think broadly speaking, the apathy is seen, and there's a high level of underreporting at the moment. So carrying on, why a violence avoidance strategy? There are no quick fix solutions to the current culture of violence. It's entrenched so deeply, and it has inherent legacy complexities. Critically though, the industry and the sectors within the industry certainly don't have the capacity to solve this on their own and to solve a societal problem. So it is definitely requiring a more holistic approach. It must involve all stakeholders and constituencies. Then this becomes a strong need for information sharing, collating of information, assessing of trends, and together with that, then introducing and ensuring that effective law enforcement is implemented, and police officials should play a much more prominent role in assisting the industry. By documenting and centrally accounting for the causes and effects of all these aspects of violence, I think it will clearly demonstrate that given the wide-ranging sources of problems, this can't be solved in isolation. So no one problem fixes everything else. We've got to look at each one, and pray tell we do not go through a 77 range iteration, but we learn from the City of Cape Town model and we take it forward. But to do that critically, the roles of government at national, provincial, and municipality with its entities, the SAPs and the metros, we have to be aligned so that municipalities can effect service delivery at a community level whilst incorporating the functions for provision of public transport within an integrated framework. It's all good we do all of that. How do we take it forward? And I think once we've gotten to interrogate PDIA approach and see how we can incorporate it, it talks to some of these issues. The industry certainly believes that it has to be collaborative and partnership driven. So government, all tiers, industry, all sectors, business, community, and labor. So this ongoing engagement and consultation must be between all stakeholders, but must have a commitment and buy-in from all the representatives. Ideally, and most importantly, I think we can't talk and talk and talk. We need to draft a strategy and have key representation from each stakeholder, craft a discussion document, formalize a strategy, and if necessary, put on record at the correct government department. So even if there's a document on file that talks to, so presentation to a portfolio committee or the social cluster within government is a must. It will ultimately culminate in a policy document, and I'm hoping today's session will guide us in that. Important to that is data collecting, a centralized data collating system, ensuring the trends and statistics are documented, build a history, continue to manage around the trends, because the strategy will not succeed if the data integrity is not, and it will not lend towards evidence planning and interventions. Ongoing support, some of the suggestions, a SAPS matrix hierarchy for ease of access and reporting for call to action, regular high-level meetings with the team, actions and accountability, finding a funding mechanism to sustain the support structure. So support structures are crucial to the success, given the possibility that there could be key representatives moving or changing. And then from a rollout point of view, education and communication is key. So we need to set up a strategic and sustainable communication process. All stakeholders educate by demonstration. And some of the key successes in recent communications has always been through the use of recognizable faces in the communication mode. So those kind of aspects will have a high and constant impact on mitigating and destruction at a low end. Time, Harry. So just getting towards the conclusion. You all know some of this and some of you know all of this. The bus and coach industry is a direct avenue for large parts of South Africa's population to get accessibility to otherwise unreachable services and facilities. That is employment, education, health. And it's not just a means for the most vulnerable, but it's also a dependency for a major part of our middle income group as well. Given that our PTOG, Transport Operating Grant funding for the next 3 fiscal years amounts to in excess of 21 billion rand, it just cannot be that the public transport environment is allowed to continue in a state of uncertainty and then add the current trends of violence, destruction, loss of life, loss of assets go unattended at the highest levels. It is also unacceptable that with each passing year, portions of the public transport operation grant are returned to Treasury due to non or underutilization of the grants, whilst there are pressing requirements like the one we're talking about today, a violence avoidance strategy that could benefit and contribute towards a more sustainable environment. The lack of government intervention thus far in providing a policy to guide and regulate violence in public transport translates to a compromised level of influence affecting the management and planning of the public transport sector. It is somewhat related to the lack of capacity and resources at the various levels of authority, and this is directly impacting on them addressing problems facing public transport. So where did we start? Is this but a dream or can it be sustainably achieved? It can be, but to achieve it, I think it's incumbent on all of us today present here to recognize and accept that public transport plays a critical role. The bus industry in particular in the creation and contribution to social and economic development. So safe and affordable transport for our citizens is provided for in the Constitution, but it depends on all stakeholders making that happen. And I do believe that notwithstanding current systemic issues related to and associated with crime and violence in our country, it is becoming a reality that public transport and the bus industry in all its form and sectors may never stand up to the same levels of quality and service that is required. And it could even be decimated. And if it does, it affects thousands of livelihoods. So it is time that we all then work collectively to stem the tide of this destruction and act decisively to countenance the scourge. Thank you, Harry, for hosting us and the Transport Forum and your sponsors and all your attendees. I hope my scratchy voice did not throw you off. And on behalf of the industry, thanks once again for allowing us to voice our concerns around violence and violence avoidance. Thanks, Harry.
Thank you so much, Basil. Always great listening to you because you're talking from where the tacky hits the tar, as they say. So thank you for your kind support. We really appreciate that. Now maybe I can announce then the next presenter is Vuisile Majola. She's the Chief Executive Officer of Abunya Capital. So she's been involved with the transfer for quite some time and supporting us. So Vuji, thank you very much for your time. She's going to talk about institutional void, common cause of model bullying. Thank you, Vuji.
Thank you very much, Harry. I am going to try again to share my screen. Otherwise, I'm going to have to ask you to share it
That's
on
fine.
your side. Okay, so just a moment.
Can you also switch on your video so that we can see you?
Okay, I will do so. I think my worry is that when we tested this morning, there was a bit of a feedback. Okay. I am still trying. Just one moment.
I'm ready to share on your behalf if you want to do that.
Okay, I think for the sake of time, perhaps that's the better option. Thank you very much, Harry. Good morning again, everybody. Thank you so much again to Saboa for the invitation. I am looking forward to unpacking further what intermodal violence or public transport violence actually stems from, because I think it's quite easy to just look at it at face value, or even as a simple socio-economic problem that our country faces. But I think it gets a bit deeper than that. So what we have looked at is the institutional voids that exist in public transport, or generally in the transport sector, that create fertile ground for violence or even bullying. I think in the screen that we are looking at now, the slide that we are looking at now, I just went and looked at some of the news stories between June 2020 and June 2021. And if you are looking at those stories, the common thread there is how the taxi industry continues to bully, intimidate, as well as conduct or continue with acts of violence against other public transport modes. And I think other than just looking at it and saying why, or almost assuming the normal attitude that says the taxi industry is unruly, it's always important to understand the why. We can move to the next screen, Harry, and the next one. I think last year the Gauteng Department of Transport embarked on a commission to investigate the root causes of taxi industry violence. And the reason why I wanted us to start there is to understand how this violence then spills over to other modes of transport. And we heard MEC Mamabolo saying within the taxi industry, there are high rates of killing, intimidation, and violence. going as far as suggesting that the taxi industry is perhaps a law unto themselves, marred with illegal operations. Their associations self-regulate, and the self-regulation is different from association to association. But in certain aspects where the taxi industry feels threatened, they would then use their collective bargaining power to intimidate other modes of transport, including the very commuters that bring in revenue to the taxi industry. And perhaps this can be attributed to the taxi industry's historic involvement in the politics of this country, as well as their understanding of how they impact or contribute to the economy. And I think one of the most glaring a report that came out of that commission was that there are 505 unsolved murder cases within the taxi industry. Now, this is not even just going outside and seeing how the industry has contributed to some acts of violence that include other modes of transport, like burning of buses, stoning of buses, intimidation of commuters. Can we move to the next screen hearing? I think what is very evident is that in most cases, and I think our academic friends in the forum will assist us in proving the hypothesis that perhaps the taxi industry is the playground bully, and that their bullying is embedded within the context and of our socio-economic existence as a country. And you cannot just look at it from an act of violence, but you have to look at it at community level. What does it mean for our national socio-economic environment? What historic events contribute to that? Technology advancements that contribute to triggering the violent acts that the taxi industry embarks on against other modes of transport. I think what is also quite important is that the development of policies and strategies within our context as a country tends to focus mostly on physical capital, but we have never really focused on the human capital issues that exist in public transportation. Next slide, Harry. Next slide, Harry. Thank you so much. No, sorry. You can go back to that one with market distortion. The Competition Commission 2.5 years ago reported that the public transportation landscape was, or market was extremely distorted. And I think the muted inclusion of all local, muted exclusion, the muted inclusion of the minibus taxi industry in local government spheres is perhaps a consequence of inconsistency and the lack of uniformity within the taxi industry itself, as well as within the different spheres and sectors of government. Operationally, the performance of public transport networks is extremely distorted if you are looking at the different regions within South Africa. The capacity of the different public transport modes also contributes to this distortion, as well as the geographic location for public transport operation to take place across the country is extremely distorted. And I think all of these things contribute to violence in public transport. I think when we then move to the next slide, Harry, and understand the definition of what we mean by institutional voids, it's basically understanding that if there's an absence or an underdevelopment of specialized intermediaries, such as database vendors, quality certification firms, regulatory corporations, and centralized control enforcement mechanisms, there are always going to be loopholes or gaps for acts such as those that we see the taxi industry embarking on. And I think in this room, we will all agree that our regulation, as well as enforcement of control in public transport, is extremely distorted. The bus industry, train, as well as the metered taxi industry, to a certain extent, has been able to adhere to a certain level of regulation, as well as centralized control. But within the taxi industry, we find that there are bigger pockets of decentralization. There are no specialized intermediaries or institutions that are designed to assist with the regulation and enforcement of that regulation within the taxi industry. Second slide, Harry. So institutional voids manifest themselves in numerous conditions. I think the first one, and I think both Harry and Basil have touched on that, the lack of institutional infrastructure. Now, with institutional infrastructure, we are not just talking about the physical infrastructure, the availability of facilities, but we're also talking about the capacity to plan and implement and roll out administrative regulatory duties that are supposed to centralize that control in public transportation. There is also within the institutional infrastructure, there is a lack of expertise that would know how to engage or integrate the taxi industry. And that is further fueled by fragmented public service. I think at all spheres of government, there are different conversations, and you are very lucky if those conversations ever find common ground or are then implemented. And then I think within this transport forum, we've dealt and we've discussed greatly the impact of poor policy planning and implementation. And I think regulatory loopholes then provide that illegal operating ground for not just the taxi industry, but for other modes of transport as well. Next slide, Harry. I think just highlighting the importance of integrating public transport modes. In South Africa, 13 municipalities are in the process of rolling out integrated public transport networks. And the majority of those plans or those IPTNs display a glaring disparity in the inclusion of the minibus taxi industry. And to a large extent, that is where now you would find that the taxi industry would then resort to bullying because they feel excluded from the planning of integrated public transport networks. I think it is quite clear that ease of accessibility, collective prosperity, and efficiency are some of the key pillars of an IPTN. But I think we are yet to see these municipalities finding a way to integrate and work with the taxi industry. And again, I think it also goes back to the fact that the different spheres of government are extremely fragmented, and the conversations and the planning and the policy frameworks that come out seek to further alienate the taxi industry from being integrated. There's an African proverb that says, a child who does not feel the warmth of a village will burn the village to feel its warmth. And I think this is precisely what we see in most cases with the taxi industry. Next slide, Harry. Now, as a country, we've got great plans, and we draw up extremely beautiful documents and policy frameworks and all sorts of other planning tools. But I think if we are looking at the NetMap 2050, it clearly says that the problems or the challenges within the transport sector in South Africa stem and relate to the institutional framework and the fragmentation thereof. That clarification and contextualization of transport roles and responsibilities between the three spheres of government to integrate, to achieve an integrated transport management solution needs to be brought to the fore. And perhaps I think the taxi industry, being the largest mover of the community in South Africa, it cannot be excluded anymore. While there is fragmentation and there is exclusion, the taxi industry is always going to enjoy the bargaining or collective bargaining power that it has with continuing with the acts of intimidation and violence. Next slide, please, Mary. Moving towards inclusive public transport, I think, as I mentioned, it's important to pay attention to institutional infrastructure and use that as economic constitution. And we know that this is going to improve the capacity and efficiency of public transport providers. The regulation and policy implementation is going to also eliminate the conflicting lines of authority that currently exist and open up room for the taxi industry to continue bullying other modes of transport. This suggests that there should be reform in transport regulation, or even enforcement those regulations. And I think a collaborative effort between the public sector and the private sector is always going to see a different approach to achieving inclusive public transport integration. Thank you, Harry. I think I'm going to leave it there. I'm not going to continue further. I am going to join the guys on the panel for more questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vuji. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Vui. That was excellent. And I think it just reiterates the point we're making, that the alignment, all the good intentions from industry and other role players, government has got to be central towards aligning it. So I think if anything, the outcomes out of today, if we craft that discussion document clearly, and we have a role to play in assisting, influencing, and guiding the outcome. So with your expertise in that space, and the city of Cape Town, and the speakers to come down the line from community and PRASA and SAPS, I think collectively we should be able to make a difference here in just getting harmonized view and narrowing it down to the core issues we need to take forward. Thanks, Harry. Over to you. I think we're now at the Q&A stage, eh?
That's correct. Can we please have Neil and Basil and Vuji switch on the videos so that I can bring them into the panel? Right, so if we can have the audience, if you can kindly use the participants box and you can raise your hand so that I can recognize you. Thank you, Olga Mashilu. You're welcome to ask your question. Just identify yourself and you can ask your question. Thank you, Olga. Olga, we can't hear you. I don't know if you're trying to speak. It seems to me there's a problem with your, if you've got a problem, then maybe you can type your question in the chat room. Okay, while Olga's then typing in the chat room, let's try, is it Lefo or Lefi? Lefi, welcome to unmute.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Harry, for this informative forum. And I'm representing Saldanha Bay Municipality in the Western Cape. I'm the acting traffic head traffic operations. I don't have a question per se, but I've got an interest in the presentation that Mr. Aransa did. I also posted a question on the chat room to ask for the presentation, and if you can share his contact details so that we can engage with him, so that we can see how we can help us in terms of our public transport challenges in the Saldanha Bay municipality area. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got MT Kumalo. Welcome to unmute.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm a student here at Stellenbosch University doing my honors in transport economics, and my research is mostly on road transport, specifically the road accidents and how it affects the economic growth. So on the interest of that topic, I actually established, or rather found, that the relationship between our transport modes are very far different from apart. So they're not integrated. And by virtue of not integrated, as what Ms. Majola said, it's difficult for us to then establish a route to the problems, because if the child in the community is the problem. That's say the child in the community doesn't feel the warmth, they will burn the entire community. So I just want to know from the Sabao and from the city of Cape Town, how proactively are you guys trying to solve and resolve that problem of integration? Because as frameworks can be here or diagrams can say that you need to integrate, what are the steps that have been taken to try to reintegrate those models or those modes of transport? Because at the end of the day, what happens on the road affects all passengers or all cars who are using those roads. So eventually we will need to have some form of integration. So what are those proactive steps that have been taken, those discussions that have they even started happening in order for you to solve this problem of violence within the roads and the roads that are shared by all commuters? Thank you.
Thank you. Let's have the panel respond to that.
Yeah, Harry, I think, okay, it's such a broad area of problem that there's no one solution. So, integration, whilst I think we drilled a little bit more into the capacity and resourcing constraints within the tiers of government, but you're essentially talking, at this point, integrating the taxi industry into mainstream public transport in a formal way or on a formal basis. Now, it doesn't take rocket science for you to do a straight up comparison. Say you're talking on the bus sector and certainly from PRASA on the rail side, a very structured, very corporate environment with a cost base that's defined, that can talk to the different costing elements of running a public transport service. And you're putting it up against a current regulated, somewhat very much lower cost base. It's apples with apples, and you can't put them in a competitive environment. So policy implementation, we are 20 years down the line on policy documents, and we still, I've got ESCOM issues on my side. Until we get the political will to take some of the success stories and learn from it and implement, and there's a version, Neil, to why always the city of Cape Town, why always the Western Cape, but there are success stories in different provinces that talk to how subsidies handled, how integrations handled, but we cannot, as a government, promote what I call a three-tiered, disparity-based public transport network running side by side. How do you explain having a world-class infrastructure for a BRT rapid transit system that's highly skewed in its funding, and then have a middle tier of public transport systems incorporating buses and rail that's battling structure challenges and funding challenges, and then have an unsubsidized element that's doing the mass of daily mobility transit unsubsidized? It's going to create an untenable situation. So three parties need to understand what limitations do exist and what opportunities do exist. And I think we need to pick the opportunity and take it forward whilst dealing with the obstacles that are present. And I think maybe a PDIA approach in that from a subsidy point of view might just help us all unravel it. But to answer Musa's question, it is not a quick fix. All the policies are there. We've got every decade and every year. I think it's bringing it together, and hopefully pretty transport authorities are established and given the teeth and are structured and capacitated, but also we need to break this chasm that exists between industry and government. It's at a point we need to come together in the same environment and say, what are the commonalities? And we have some very policy documents on the table and a couple more seminars, webinars coming up that will bring us closer to this. But it's not just a taxi or a bus problem. It is a public transport problem in entirety. Harry?
Thank you, Basil.
If I can have a stab at that.
Yes, Neil, please.
Yep.
Basil, you and Fuji, kindly have a look at the comments in the chat room from Olga and so on while Neil is answering.
I'm going through.
All right. From my side, just to Molefi, yes, obviously, my details will be available from Harry and Basil. You can obtain it from there. There's no problem. With regards to the issue of integration, one of the branches within public transport regulations within our department is a branch named Industry Transition. And that branch's pure objective is to formalize the taxi or the minibus taxi industry. So what we are doing through our integrated public transport network is to see how we can utilize the minibus taxi industry, for example, to aid in our feeder services towards our trunk routes. That is one way that we are considering that, so sort of a hybrid system, so that we do not exclude them entirely, that there is a way that we have them form part of the integrated public transport network, because they are part of the bouquet of operators that we can make use of. And unfortunately, whether we would like it or not, they are a preferred service provider for many of the commuters out there. Although we would want all the commuters to rather make use of buses, it's not necessarily the case, as we find in the Noon, for example, in Cape Town. The commuters prefer the minibus taxis over the MyCity. So that's sort of challenges that we have, that we are busy investigating and trying to understand. One thing further that we do is that we have established successfully a pilot transport operating company, and that is trying to get a few taxi associations to provide a service on a specific route for us. And in that way, forming a official transport operating company that we can then buy that service from them to provide it for us. It worked effectively, and the pilot project has been authorized for further rollout by our council for further investigation and potential further rollout. And what was a benefit out of that was the fact that the taxi drivers no longer had to work extensive hours. They worked normal. I think it was an 8-9 hour shift that they were working. There were taxis for pickup in 10 minutes apart or 15 minutes apart sort of spaces. People didn't have to wait long for a taxi along that route for a pickup point. There was a much better working environment for both the taxi driver and the operator. So it was now a matter of whether it's running as profitable as they would have wanted it to. So that is also being right now being considered. But that is how we in Cape Town, for example, are trying to integrate the minibus taxi industry into the bouquet of public transport within our environment, because the reality is that they are there, they are a chosen mode, and unfortunately we can't force the commuters not to make use of them.
Thank you, Neil. Virgie, maybe you and Basil want to respond to Olga's question related to Dr. Lee Randall's research. Please keep it short. We're already over the time, and I still want to give you guys some opportunity for closing remarks. Thank you, Virgie.
Are you going? I must confess I'm not familiar with it, so I'm not going to talk to the detail. It would be unfair to talk to an academic document that's researched without having read it. But I think, broadly speaking, and I think Helen's response as well touches on it. some of the studies are very centric, dealing with a particular angle or aspect. There are a basket of issues, and today's event talks to not just crime, it's protest action, disruption, dissatisfaction, everything resulting in violence and destruction. It's got a whole lot of psyche undertones from a nation and a community. It's about government understanding the people within constituency, and as Neil has put it, what matters to the people there and what is the thing for the people in that area. Solution, that's a policy stating this is how we fix it. But although I think what we would do is I'd be keen to look at Lee Randall's document and then maybe talk to it at this on that specifically, unless
Thank you, Basil.
I think, thank you very much. I think I also agree with Helen and Basil. It would be quite unfortunate of us to throw that in the same basket as the generic or the general intermodal violence. The research that I think Olga is referring to is the research concerning the taxi drivers specifically in the taxi industry, and I think that would be relevant when you are looking and trying to make sense of the conditions that kind of perpetuate violence within the taxi industry. However, I think what is more important here is the bigger institutional policy regulation issues that kind of create a fertile ground for a specific mode of transport to bully other modes of transport. And I think the taxi industry is the playground bully when you are looking at public transportation. And that is not just because of its own internal problems or internal conditions or environments, but it is also sustained by the lack of policy and regulatory implementation. I think Helen in her comment also raised the fact that there are policies that talk about integrating the taxi industry. There is work that has been done to see how we bring the taxi industry into the integrated public transport networks. However, where we fail is where there is that in lack of proper institutional infrastructure to enable implementation and follow through, specifically at metro municipal level. I think we also, we always make an example of the efforts that the city of Cape Town is doing with regards to integrating the taxi industry. But now, if you're looking at all the other metros, everybody is doing their own thing, and there is no uniformity. That is why we are going to see longer time periods where there is a conflict between the taxi industry and the intended public transport network solutions. Thank you, Harry.
Vuji. Yeah, thank you, Vuji. Ladies and gentlemen, great panel we're having here. Let's have some closing comments, brief, please. We can start with Neil Aransa. Thank you, Neil. Closing comments.
From my side, colleagues, thank you very much for the opportunity and for the indulgence from our side. Yes, as I stated, the transport industry is a complex industry, and the minibus taxi industry even more so. We have no illusions about that. That is why we, as much as possible, try to see how best we can incorporate all the needs of the role players within the industry, and in that way try to then alleviate volatility in the industry as well. But we always welcome any insight, any comments from anybody. It's always welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil. Vuji?
Thank you very much, Harry. I think what is critical to understand is that at the center and at the core of the instability or intimidation that exists within the public transport sector, the people who suffer the most are the commuters. And I think if all public transport modes, as well as the different spheres of government, took an approach that said, we want to ensure a safe and efficient public transport service to our community or to the commuters, then a lot of other issues that come out would then be dealt with directly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vuji. Much appreciated. Basil, some closing remarks for this stage?
Thanks, Harry. Yeah, I think, I cannot stress enough what was, a while ago, just sporadic, isolated incidences of violence or destruction or whatever you call it is escalating to point of no return. I mean, Quebec the other week, a whole batch of buses gone. Harry Smith under siege today. Interstate lines in the Free State the other week. It's just become too easy, and effectively we've got to get a handle, get people to engage, and to be able to express dissatisfaction and or unhappiness outside of putting millions of rands worth of assets under the fire, because already the public transport environment is constrained, uncertainty. It's got an aging fleet. You take away on a daily basis X number of those assets that should be operating and providing a service. Ditto that. It's the commuter who ultimately pays the price for it. And we don't go forward, we go significantly backwards. So today is a start. It's a discourse. It's by no means all the solutions and answers. Collectively a commitment on part 2 when we hear a little bit more on the angles and the different approaches. And towards the end of the day, I will ensure that I collectively put all this wisdom that we have to work and create some kind of process that will give us momentum. Thanks, Harry, and to everybody.
Indeed. Thank you, Basil. Let's give a hand to our panelists this far. Thank you very much, guys. Sharing lots of knowledge here with us. We really appreciate that. But please don't disappear. We're still going to continue. We're going to have 3 great presentations this afternoon and the questions and answers again. But thank you for your support this far. Ladies and gents, let's take a short 10 minutes, 9 minutes break. Grab a cup of coffee. At 11:15, we will be back. Yes, I'll put up a timer for us. Thank you very much. Tabelo, thanks. I see you trying to share your screen. So he can assist you that you can successfully do that. We gladly help you.
I wanted to drive it from my side,
Okay.
but I did open it once, but
you see, when you select the share screen, you should get the options which screen you want to share.
okay.
And then you select that screen.
Like it is this one. Where are we now? Yeah, is that okay?
There we go. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, should I like just leave it as it is until when you make introductions and stuff?
That's fine. Maybe Basil, if you can introduce Tabelo.
That would be my job to introduce Mr. Tabelo Khadebe.
And you want
Tabelo,
me to put my
no. I'll do it for you. So on the second part of our program for today, welcome everybody. Harry, are we good? Live and going?
Yes, you can go for it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, folks. The next speaker then is Mr. Tabelo Khadebe. Tabelo is a former Zambian-trained journalist who has extensive community and business development roles spanning several decades. He currently is serving as a community representative at NEDLAC, and is also on the Financial Sector Transformation Council, the FSTC. He's also a member on the board of trustees at the Assisa Foundation, and as well as the national coordinator of the Financial Sector Campaign Coalition. That's the FSCC. He's going to present and talk to us today with a view from the role of community in violence avoidance. Welcome, Tabelo. Are you doing your presentation alone? You got a team or just yourself?
Thank you very much, Basil.
Good to go.
Okay, I will be alone, unfortunately, and which in itself is not something that's very good, because I was supposed to be with representatives of taxi drivers. But I guess this being the start, we will improve on this as we move forward.
Is there any way that you can switch on your video, Tabelo?
I'm looking for it. I can't find it here now.
That's it.
Where? Here.
No. Okay, it's fine. Let's not interrupt you. Continue your presentation.
Okay. I'm sorry. I guess I'll open my video later. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tabelo Khadebe. I think it's important for me to indicate for those who may be interested to know the NEDLAC community constituency is made up of the South African National Civics Organization, the National Women's Organization, the Disabled People South Africa, as well as the South African Youth Council and the Financial Sector Campaign Coalition. And as you know, NEDLAC is the public forum for dialogue set up by government to look at economic development and labor issues. Yes, as South Africans, we often differ about a range of things, and sometimes very violently. Consequently, it is no surprise that even in matters related to public transport, we would not disappoint, but act true to form and possibly emerge from this very webinar, still clinging on to our differences. Fortunately, in this case, without any violence. Our differences are by and large historical, and that alone is a subject of another webinar on its own. However, when we do happen to agree on whatever that we happen to agree on, then the entire world cannot help but take notice and be compelled to admire without end. Notably, highlights in this regard include we adopted one of the best constitutions ever, winning the Rugby World Cup, the Soccer Africa Cup of Nations in style, as we did, hosting a fabulous Soccer World Cup, and or electing a world icon, Nelson Mandela, as president, to name but a few of those areas where we happen to just agree. Unfortunately, in the transport industry, we really have very little to brag about, apart from the blue train, of course, and or showing the Japanese that a vehicle designed largely for family use can be used to move huge droves of the workforce, largely, questionably, as there has been questions that were raised by other speakers before here today. We have to agree that our record of road fatalities remains infinitely horrendous. Our bus transport systems have been a sham from time immemorial, despite numerous efforts to improve the services. Our passenger train networks have been woefully inadequate, unreliable, unsafe, and mostly overloaded, even at the peak of its usefulness until the advent of COVID-19, which has now decimated most of whatever little it could offer. We can all agree that the impact is devastating beyond words, to say the least. That is the impact of violence. This devastation, occasioned by physical violence, translates into untold numbers of loss of human lives, incomes, jobs, leisure and pleasure opportunities, as well as the myriad of other miseries inflicted on the people daily. Such violence extends into different and or permanent emotional scars, or often both. It also mutates into the scourge of different manifestations of gender-based violence, so on, including the wanton disregard of the needs of the disabled, the elderly, and the infirm, and so on and so forth. We must briefly attempt to find agreement around why we find ourselves where we are today. The undeniable truth is that we have, for eons to this day, been a violent people. A critical condition for us to be able to agree that we indeed are a violent people at the best of times is that we have to see violence as not merely limited to the destruction of assets such as vehicles, trains, infrastructure, that is perpetrated by faceless, lawless, and frustrated persons only. Our definition of violence should include the consequences and or outcomes of the following. One, the limited choices for some people to choose where they would live in relation to where workplaces are located. The huge inequalities, especially income inequality, in our country, also described by others as among the worst in the world. The injustices that are daily visited upon many in our communities simply because they cannot afford access to redress in the courts of law, for instance. Lack of agency to express themselves differently owing to low levels of education or minimal exposure to non-violent means. Assuming that we are in agreement that violence emanates from a variety of silent actions best described through the paternalistic approach, which says, take what we offer to you. We know what is best for you. After all, we are doing you a favor, given that you do not have your own transport means. Otherwise, we can even take this away from you, even if you have to pay for it. This approach is often practiced towards the commuters by many in the industry, including even in the taxi industry. Therefore, as Martin Luther King once said, violence begets violence. Well, towards possible policies and strategies for solutions, as the community constituency, would like to see the urgent revival of commuter forums at local and district levels brought together in a national umbrella structure. As this happens, we must set up proper, visible, and sustainable funding, remuneration, and training mechanisms for these forums. We must also ensure that policies, operating procedures, and all public transport offerings place quality and people's needs at the center of everything that is provided. It is our humble view that aside from advancing a long wish of list of demands and or ideas, the simple 3 action items listed above would go a long way towards laying a solid foundation to counter the endemic violence in the public transport sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tabelo. I think that was punchy, to the point, and community telling us, don't tell us what we want and how we want it. Listen to how we want things to be done. But I think critically, for purposes of this forum and going forward, your direct access to the various fora that you mentioned, SANCO, DSA, NWA, SACO, and most importantly, NEDLAC. I think NEDLAC facilitates a broader, wider range, but we need to start homing in on that so that we can take your definition of violence and the consequences and expound it as to how we can mitigate and how we can assist. The one thing you touched true on is very often the industry thinks it knows what's best for the community, as opposed to engaging with the community as to what they believe is the best requirement. So it shows that we have some work to do, and we'll continue doing that. But thank you for that very punchy and insightful reflection from a community point of view. Much appreciated. Okay, folks, moving on. As per the program, we have a view from PROSA, which is an SOE, as we all know. And representing PROSA today is Mr. Obakilwe Sekoani. He is representing PROSA as the Senior Manager from Strategy and Systems at Corporate Security. So he did indicate yesterday that he'll give us a very thematic issues approach on the challenges facing PROSA. I think it is in all our interests, and from a national vantage and key point of view, that PROSA succeeds and gets back to its glory heydays, because that would solve a major chunk of the stumbling block in what we're trying to avert here. So welcome, Obakilwe, and over to you.
The request that came was very simple, but a bit complicated, because it says we have to speak to the issue of the impact of violence on PRASA infrastructure, which literally I would describe it as crime, not violence per se, because we're dealing with a situation that is very unfortunate, because we are no longer effective on our rail, since there is an absolute vandalism, sabotage, and what one could term terrorism actually on our rail infrastructure. Now, my approach is very simple. Let's deal firstly with our how one defines your public transport and public transport system. And my departure is that there's no clear consensus of a definition of public transport. It is oftenly used to describe a system used by the public of a means of transporting passengers in mass numbers. It consists of a range of transport modes, including railway buses, trolleys, buses, trolley buses, trams, ferries, coaches, etc. It is also collective transport, which is also considered as a form of transport like minibuses or fixed group taxis. There is a distinction between multimodal and intermodal transport systems. I deliberately factored in the last bullet there to say there's a debate whether taxis are part of the public transport system or not. And we will touch on it when we go towards conclusion of my presentation. Public transport has an important role to play in reducing social exclusion by providing access to work, health, leisure, and employment. So the need to reduce crime and disorder becomes very primary. Fear of crime and personal security is a major inhibiting factor to the use of public transport. Reducing actual levels of crime does not necessarily equate to reductions in people's perceptions of crime, even if you can put the defense force on your railway network. The perception has been created that the railway infrastructure is dilapidated, that it's very unsafe to use, and that's a perception that shall sit with us for a very long time. The nature and extent of crime on public transport is limited information available as to the extent of crime and disorder on public transport. There are multiple agencies which are responsible for maintaining and operating various systems within the public transport system. The lack of standardized reporting and recording of crime and disorder on public transport. There is difficulty in analyzing available data. And finally, is because there are different policing and security arrangements in place across the network and the likely levels of under-reporting on the system. Can move to the next slide. 6 categories of crime that are typically evident on the public transport network is antisocial behavior, crimes against passengers, including theft, robbery, and assault, crimes against employees, including assault and robbery, vandalism and graffiti, line of route crimes, which are offenses along routes that cause delay or affect safety, and en route offenses from those at stations and stops. Whilst we are talking about vandalism and related, we need to elevate that as actually a national security threat that is confronting BRASA currently. Crime attractors, crime generators, and public transport network. We've got 2 issues that we need to pay attention to in terms of crime that is confronting BRASA currently. Is the places that offenders visit due to knowledge of the area's criminal opportunities in order to commit crime. And it can arise as out of an area that attracts large numbers of people for reasons other than committing crime. At particular times and places, this concentration of victims and offenders produces unplanned opportunity for offending. We can move to the next slide. Crime concentrations on public transport and prevention implications. The design of public transport infrastructure is the one that exposes the level of criminality within the transport system or the rail transport system, which includes lighting, bad lighting. You go to Mabupani station, for example, which is located right in the middle of a township. And you look into the lighting infrastructure or the absolute infrastructure of that station and the depot itself, you realize that no, there are a number of limitations which might have created an enabling environment for criminality. And the environment itself, as I indicated, the location is very important. Management of stations and stops, introduction of capable guardians or community involvement. BRASA has embarked on a process of what we term PR2P, protection, a community role in protection of BRASA infrastructure. We can use effective handlers, many aspects of transport network, regulated entrance and exit points that connect internal environment. This offer clear prevention opportunities, but must also be located within an intelligence-led or problem-solving approach. I attended a meeting at Acacia municipal offices on Tuesday. One of the issues that came out from the communities, which absolutely confirmed the issue that crime that gets to be committed on our rail network is not necessarily committed by our own communities. There was a march yesterday by communities to present a memorandum to the police, accusing the police of not providing sufficient protection in terms of PRASA infrastructure. Now we have to ask ourselves a question. Who are the people who are behind the vandalism and sabotage of PRASA infrastructure? Who are the beneficiaries? What's the modus operandi that they are using? And you can only do that if you are embarking on intelligence-led or problem-solving approach. Next slide. Overview of security challenges. We've got senseless attacks on operational security personnel. Increasing high demand. These senseless attacks have actually now being elevated to killing of our security officers. And we don't exactly know, because there is nothing that's remaining to protect. What is it that these criminals are now looking for when they are going to our own security personnel? Is it to instill fear, or there are other motives? Increasing high demand of ferrous and non-ferrous metals, crime, theft, and malicious damage to property, open nature of the rail network with encroaching communities, socio-economic factors, e.g. poverty, unemployment, and lack of supply chain outreach to communities, not enough dependence on modern technology, not enough intelligence to plan proactive operations, inadequate surveillance of the network in real estate, inadequate cohesion between PRASA and its stakeholders, where communities should partner with PRASA on asset protection, and economic sabotage. And what's the impact? The impact of cable theft, amongst others, on users of passenger rail service in South Africa is highly understated. Passenger rail users are adversely impacted on, as the absence of passenger rail services forces them to utilize alternative transport. The cost of transport for many passengers is so high that the great majority of passenger rail users have opted to resign from their employment, as more than 50% of their monthly wages is spent on transport costs. And we are just giving a simple breakdown of travel costs between Mabopane and Pretoria. Your daily travel cost is about 90 rand, with PRASA cost 19 rand. The variance is about 71 rand. So you can just imagine on monthly basis the damage that this element of crime has done to the economic well-being of our own communities. Next slide. Update on security capacity. PRASA has recently employed more than 3,100 extra security officers. Armed response, we've got about 736. Monitoring control room operators are 164. Physical security is 2,200. Officials were employed as 7-day workers, which provides some in terms of overtime costs. The table below will illustrate in terms of the deployment according to provinces. Gauteng North, we've got 814. Physical security. KwaZulu-Natal is 330. Western Cape is 550. Eastern Cape is 154. Mainland passenger services is 198. PRASA Crest is 154. As much as the figures can still be 3,100, for PRASA to be able to effectively protect its infrastructure, which includes your walling and fencing and other integrated security solutions. In terms of the human resource, the numbers, even if we can recruit 10,000, won't be able to sufficiently deal with the current situation that we are being confronted with. The next slide. National deployments in terms of infrastructure, depots, we've got 531, staging yards, we've got 394, mobile on board is 170, infrastructure is 1,080, stations is 2,229, armed response is 818. This number of armed response colleagues is absolutely low. Moreover, when we are moving towards rehabilitation of stations and substations, we still have to do much in terms of increasing that number. Administration, logistics, and support is 135. Can move to the next. Now there we've got a deployment of staff according to regions and hotspots. I don't have to go into much details in terms of that because they wouldn't make a lot of sense. But that's how we deploying in terms of your staging yards, your control room stations, and those who are on mobile duties, building substations, relay rooms, depots, and Rasa Crest, response teams, and whatsoever. Thanks. We can move to the next one. Is the same when you look into how we have been targeted, province to province and region by region, and you look at the vulnerability or extent of vulnerability of our railway infrastructure, which are emanating from this organized crime syndicates. Thanks. We can move to the next slide. Now, what causes this situation and the impact that it has on PRASA? It's criminal elements, drug abuse, and other societal issues. Difficulty for staff to conduct maintenance duties due to issues around our environment, theft and vandalism of infrastructure. And you can see from those pictures, colleagues, this is what we are dealing with on a daily basis. It's not exaggerated. Next slide. I'm quite sure some of you have been exposed to these horrible pictures anyway. We know that for us to be able to move this informal settlements is going to be another tall order because of our government regulations. Next slide. Yeah, the horrific scenes that are confronting us on a daily basis, informal settlement, accessibility to our tracks, and the shacks that are being built on embankments. I mean, all these things. And the argument that this situation actually started under lockdown is incorrect, because the first incidents of vandalism, sabotage, and interference of the rail infrastructure actually started around 2015, not necessarily last year during lockdown. We can move to the next slide, colleagues. That's the estimated cost of what PRASA is suffering from in terms of theft and vandalism when we take regions and corridors. This is a huge amount that we are dealing with. Next slide, colleagues. What are we trying to put in place in terms of dealing with the challenges that are confronting us? One is to introduce e-guarding, two body-worn cameras, because once we've got this integrated security solution or one-stop security solution, then we will be able to mitigate some of the issues that we are dealing with. But to arrive to this situation, we need to firstly start with a protection of, or perimeter protection of our infrastructure through fencing, walling, and others. We can move to the next slide. We're going to deploy technical surveillance measures and countermeasures, aerostat surveillance solutions, and security incident management system, which is a requirement actually when it comes to our railway safety regulator requirements. We can move to the next slide. Thank you. We're going to use passive GSM monitoring, arsenal register, bulletproof vests. This is just to complement the challenges that we are faced with in terms of security on our entire railway infrastructure. The next slide. We're going to use the remotely piloted aircraft systems. There is the work in this regard is very advanced in terms of taking out bids and adjudicating on these projects that are going to be implemented in order to complement PRASA on bodies. Then we are going to embark on information-driven operations with investigations, criminal forensic, and laboratory and legal support. As I indicated, there is progress in terms of trying to put together all these things that will deter criminality and create an early warning system for PRASA moving forward. Thanks, colleague. We can move to the next slide. Our remedial action is the alignment of security strategy to corridor plans. I can affirmatively confirm that we have recently submitted a totally revised security plan to the railway safety regulator, which will be cascaded down to your regions in order to provide a holistic or comprehensive security of our critical infrastructure. We're going to embark on capacity building and skills development, integrating community into the crime prevention strategy. I've already indicated that we have already started with the process of recruitment of volunteers within our communities. We are busy with CIRA in terms of trying to get them to get a requisite skills and relevant registration with CIRA, so as we can put all these volunteers on our rail network. And as part of escorting and ensuring that our commuters are safe and promoting the brand PRASA. We've got effective partnership with SAPS, including the railway police. Railway police colleagues have got their own internal challenges in terms of human resources, and that was reported in the stakeholder meeting of Tuesday in Acacia. They lack in terms of your patrol vehicles, for example, and other equipments. There is an engagement with the State Security Agency, National Prosecuting Authority, and the Hawks, and other state-owned entities, ESCOM, Telcom, and Transnet. The Border Control Coordinating Committee and other bodies like your non-ferrous crime combating committees, and your national joints. And next slide, colleagues. There is also an ministerial action plan, which is literally involving your subs and PRASA into your joint operations. The number of operations that have been conducted could be beyond 680 by now, including what has been happening for the past few weeks. The number of arrests have increased, and the challenge that we have is getting these people to go on trial and secure the successful conviction. Over 43.8 million worth of PRASA infrastructure related equipment has been seized. We can move to the next slide, colleagues. Partnerships and interventions, I'm not going to go into too much details there. in terms of copper cable and infrastructure theft partnership, PRASA, Eskom, Telkom, and Transnet, there are continuous engagement at the group CEO's level. We're putting in place stringent requirements for any person intending to register a new scrap metal business. Very interesting, colleagues, when you do your own threat and risk assessment. Most of these scrap metal businesses are located just by your stations or close to your railway network. And unfortunately, you know that the owners have confronted the courts and actually came up with a situation wherein when we want to do random searches, it becomes very difficult because we are being accused of abusing the business owners. Clamp down on illegal scrap metals to reduce market accessibility. We need to understand who are the actual end user at the end. Because as much as we're dealing with scrap metal dealers, we need to understand the actual market where all these metals are going to. We require the export market to declare all sources of acquired copper materials for export supported and necessary documentation to enhance compliance. Security response coordination, declaring a state of disaster on cable theft. This is no longer a PRASA issue, colleagues. This is a national security issue, which requires other departments to take over. We can only do better if the state security agency and the cybercrime intelligence can play a leading role in this regard. We need to develop a national cable theft prevention and resourcing strategy. And we hope that will be achieved anytime soon. Establishment of a well-resourced joint operational center. The operational center to be funded and resourced by the participating entities and with the government and other stakeholders playing a leading role in the running of the operational center. Next slide, colleagues. There is a need for integrated mechanism to gain access to the Hawks, NP, and others. Community-based projects with CPF support. It's very interesting how the role that a CPF is playing in terms of identifying criminal hotspots along our railway corridors. The fact that people are unable to go or to effectively access their workplace, the reason that there is a depression in terms of the costs that get to be accrued due to taxi fares and whatsoever, has actually made CPF to play a very leading role in terms of identifying certain areas where PRASA cannot effectively cover due to challenges that I mentioned in terms of human resource when it comes to physical security. Better regulation for disposal of scrap and creating an integrated information gathering. We are in a process of coming up with an information gathering strategy. Colleagues, we have to be very careful because once you talk about information gathering, you get to be confused with intelligence gathering, which then borders within the ambit of cybercrime intelligence and state security agency. So the method that we are going to implement will be feeding into those two state entities. We are going to train our staff in basic intelligence gathering through the assistance of the state security agency. It doesn't necessarily convert them into intelligence officers. Next slide, colleague. Can we move to the next slide? Okay. The intention is to significantly reduce security incidents, provide a security suite that serves as a deterrent to detect and destroy all possible threats, focus efforts on all incidents that directly affect predictability of services, protecting infrastructure assets, protecting the people, and combating revenue leakage to ensure a consistent flow of income. Next slide. I should be approaching the end of my presentation. I think that was the last slide, so I was correct. Thank you very much, colleagues.
Thank you so much, Bakilwe.
Thanks, Abakilwe. Well, well, Riaste, you are right on cue, knowing without driving it that you know where you are on the last slide. Excuse me. Thank you very much for presenting. I certainly don't think you're the envy of anyone, you and Prasa, fighting a syndicate, intelligence-driven gatherings. I mean, that's a staggering number of a kill. 109 billion to just hit the reset button, let alone trying to protect that investment going forward. But I think what we need to do is align certainly at a high level with Prasa, and hopefully you and Kagiso can facilitate that. You're down the road anyway in terms of setting up the JOC. You've already got access to SAPs with your joint operations. So in all those learning curves and learning outcomes, we mustn't go and reinvent. If SAPs has done certain things with you, we can extend to the rest of the industry. And in terms of the JOC, maybe whilst the focus is towards Prasa, if you can see space to integrate the rest of the industry, so there's a collective approach towards taking the next step. We certainly will want to be part of that. Good luck with your rehabilitation projects. And yeah, you need to get back. We are all dependent on Prasa. We need to get you back alive and functional. And most importantly, you need to get back to allow those people that either had the option of spending 50% of earnings on alternative transport or taking unemployment. That is not a choice we want to give the people of our country. So your success, the country's success, good luck. And thanks for presenting. And you'll stand by for, yep, you'll stand by for the discussion shortly. 100%. Thanks, Brigadier. I didn't get a bio of you, so I'm going to do an introduction as follows. We now have the most senior ranked official on the platform, a brigadier. So Brigadier Mashabani is from the SAPS, and he indicated the other day, and he articulated his vision, that it is all part of the big picture to ensure that we leave a legacy for the next generations to come. And he's passionate about ensuring that this happens. So as you can see up there, the Brigadier is going to talk to us about a macro approach from SAPS and his government department to this critical issue of violence avoidance and law enforcement. Thank you very much, Brigadier. All technology issues eradicated. Welcome, and you may proceed.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. Harry, thanks for saving our day today. We appreciate that. Colleagues, good afternoon. Before I start, I think I want to just make one comment with regard to the presentation by the Transport Department. I fully agree that, yes, we are employing people at various environments, and like I indicated earlier on, an integrated approach will be able to resolve all our challenges. Because we might have 1,000 people and we won't see any impact. Our actions or interactions are not integrated. So it is very important that we look at that and make sure that we close all the gaps, and we also ensure that people understand what they need to do and when and how they should do it. It is very important that our interaction of policing with the security of Praga or Transnet look at in a very serious light. Because currently we are working in silos. We know that their guys are mostly looking at their infrastructure in terms of safety.
Brigadier, sorry to interrupt. Can you turn down your sound on your side, on your PCs? Turn down your sound, your speakers.
Because I see it's muted, but it's still going through.
Yeah, you're talking through my phone, so that's why it's working. So you should stay on mute, but if your speaker volume should be down.
Yeah, surely now it's fine.
Now it's good.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you go to the next slide? Thank you very much. These are just this is the scope of the presentation, colleagues. I'm not going to go through it. Go to the next slide, please. Thank you very much. In terms of the introduction, we just dealt with the mandate of the South African Police Service, and we looked at the issue of the JCPS cluster. And we are saying, and I think we all know about that, we experience increased level of lawlessness. And as you see, these days, people are marching in terms of the curfews, they are marching because of salaries and all those other things. These are part of what we are saying, increased levels of lawlessness, impunity, intolerance, and disregard for the law. Yes, we have a lot of community protests due to service delivery and others. They also form part of our daily policing activities. And we know that the media is also playing a big role in terms of assisting us with policing issues. It also contributes to wide increased incidents of incitement through this social media and other platforms, which might lead to serious repercussions. Please go to the next slide. Thank you very much. These are just a list of many legislative mandates that we are having and that we are using and that are mandating us to carry on with our day-to-day activities in policing. I'm not going to go through them. Can we go to the next slide, please, Jerry? It's still a continuation of the legislative mandates. Just go to the next slide. Now, in terms of this slide that talks to the security cluster, we have a few structures that form of the command structure of the JCPS cluster. The first one are the National Joint Operational Intelligence Structures. That's the NAT joints, that where we are currently sitting, dealing with the issues of COVID and other issues pertaining to the security of the country. And then we've got the National Joint Operations Center, that's the NASJOC. That's where the bulk of the work is done, the operational issues activated from the NAT joints. We also have the PROV joints. Those are structures in the provinces. And then we also have the Provincial Joint Operational Centers. Those are the PROV jobs and the Cluster Joint Operational Centers. You will see in future they are going to change to District Joint Operational Centers because we are doing away with the clusters as we go on. These structures are established to deal with all various incidents, and I should clearly state that these are integrated multidisciplinary structures that have been established with various government departments as well as various structures, community structures that are involved in there to deal with issues that come up and that needs those integrated approaches, so that we support each and every government or non-governmental organizations that are participating in terms of dealing with issues that are at hand. The NAT joints is able to issue instructions to all various government environments so that they can activate their plans in terms of dealing with any type of disaster or incident that's taking place. You'll see as we carry on, we will be tabulating on a few issues in terms of the task teams and others that we have established. The majority of people think the NAT joints or the NAT job prof joints or provincial joints are something that belongs to the police. No, it's not a police-driven thing. These are multidisciplinary, interdepartmental approach. If, for an example, now we have a health crisis in terms of COVID, the Department of Health will be taking the lead from the side of the joints, and all other departments will be supporting the Department of Health while we are dealing with this monster called COVID. And each and every responsible department will be dealing with their responsibilities while we are looking at the issues pertaining to COVID-19. It is not a police or army directed thing. It is just a structure that it includes all other relevant role players depending on the type of a disaster or incident facing. So it is very important that people understand that the nut joint is not for the police. It is established to deal with all operational issues that needs to be attended to in an integrated and multidisciplinary way. Okay, please go to the next slide, Gary. Right, in terms of this, again, ourselves in partnership with other government and departments and role players, we embark on multidisciplinary operations to combat crime. I'll give a quick example. We've got an MOU with the Department of Transport that is dealing with crime only. And as we go on, you'll see that we've got we established a rapid rail policing environment. That is a directorate within the South African Police Service that's dealing specifically with rapid rail issues. We also have people that are dealing with issues pertaining to road crime and combating initiatives. We're also looking at multidisciplinary road policing initiatives, whether it's during the Easter, during the festive season, or throughout the year. And we're also looking at interactions with traditional leaders and other structures within our various communities, where we are saying, together we can make it. As the police alone, they won't be able to make it, because criminals are staying within our various communities. And the communities see criminals sometimes or the other while they are committing crime. So we need that partnership, we need that information so that we are able to apprehend them, and people must feel free to walk at any time of the day and to do their business as usual. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. Thank you very much. We have the following multidisciplinary operations taking place on a regular basis. Like I indicated earlier on, within the rail environment, we've got rapid rail deployment on a daily basis. We even have the long distance deployment of our police officers to ensure the safety on the long distance trains with regard to individuals that are there or passengers, as well as the goods. We also have the community policing forums. I know the majority of you will understand what is a CPF, and we are having joint crime prevention initiatives. You all know that we had a challenge with rhino poaching in Kruger National Park. We've got rhino poaching operations that are jointly conducted between ourselves, the Army, Environmental Affairs, and other role players. And of course, with regard to the safety of women and children, which has been declared as a pandemic by the president of the country, we're also working on that with our colleagues from social development and all other role players. We also have the anti-drug campaigns and operations. Remember, colleagues, some people are committing these crimes because they are under the influence of drugs, alcohol, and others. And we also have those units that must look at that to make sure that we close the gap. And the cross-border operations. We know that crime is happening throughout our borders. Properties are stolen from the country, they are taken to our neighboring countries and all those other things. And we also have a 24/7 I don't know how they end with a 27/7. It's a 24/7 high visibility patrols to detect criminality, reckless and negligent driving, and all other road-related offenses. The VCPs is high visibility crime prevention patrols in various areas with the stop and searches and others, and we also conduct roadblocks on a daily basis across the country. These are helping us to even detect illegal firearms, drugs, and other illicit activities that are performed on a regular basis, like people carrying those housebreaking equipment and others. They are very proactive initiatives that we are taking in terms of our highway patrols and all the other activities that we are performing at the malls on a day-to-day basis. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you very much. We still continue with operations and initiatives. We're looking at high visibility, road safety, and other initiatives at specific focus areas. When I say specific focus areas, we're talking to intelligence-led operations across the board. Because if we're just moving around and not having intelligence, sometimes we might have a lot of challenges. And we are also looking at ensuring the safety and security of passengers using public transport. Like I indicated with the trains, we've got our rapid rail policing. With the buses, we've got patrols. You see that while buses are driving, our law enforcement will sometimes stop them if they have information, search the buses and those other issues. And the policing of the rail environment is very important. As we currently know that in some places, trains are not moving anymore. And we have one train driving from Soweto to Joburg, and the overloading and the staff riding and all those other things. Like this in conjunction, of course, with Praza and other partners around there. Go to the next slide, please. Thank you very much. In order for us to be able to deal with this effectively, we've seen that much as we are dealing with the high visibility patrols, we also have to look at saying, let's have various task teams that will be focusing on the investigation as well as information gathering, intelligence gathering with regard to these various offenses or various environments that are giving us a tough time. The taxi task teams are there to look at all violence between taxis, buses, and other modes of transport. We also having a sexual offenses task teams to look after our beautiful women and children. We have the actual theft units, cross-border crime investigations. So if goods are stolen from South Africa and they are taken across the border, we've got agreements with our neighboring countries as well as other international countries where we can get assistance to get them back into the country. Crowd management units, you know, we spoke about the various service delivery matches. We've got the units that are dealing with that. Trucks and freight task teams, you know, we are faced with a number task of trucks being attacked because of the employment of foreign drivers and all other criminal activities. We are having a team that's dealing with that specifically in KZN, Limpopo, and provinces that are affected with the attacks on trucks. Rapid rail policing, as I indicated, we regard rail as a form of an economic drive in the country. And you know, previously, if I can just say something on that, we didn't have a lot of commodities being transported by road previously. Commodities like United States and those chemical commodities were not transported by land. They were transported by rail because these issues on our roads, because once there is an accident with a gas truck, then or a chemical truck transporting chemicals, then we are going to have serious challenges in terms of fatalities that we might experience there. This is just a personal plea for transport to also look at that, bring back the rail and say chemicals as well as gases that are really dangerous must not be transported through the road. It must be transported through the rail, and they can just be taken from a certain point straight to the factory on arrival. Because currently we transport these things from Durban and all, and once we have an accident, we have serious challenges. So those are things that we have to look at in terms of changing our laws to address these issues, to avoid a lot of fatalities that we are experiencing on our roads. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you very much. We strive towards ensuring that we have well-planned crime combating initiatives, communication with various stakeholders. That integrated approach is very important for us to look at that and make sure that we make people aware at all times that they need to know that we are working as a team. Conducting integrated multidisciplinary operations is one of our core responsibilities and our core function that we are looking at to make sure that as government we speak from one voice, not in silos. We're not working in silos. We need to work together and making sure that things are working and they really getting sufficient attention from various environments. From the response to service delivery protest, this is what we normally do on a regular basis, although some service delivery protests are not planned, but we are trying by all means to make sure that we are there in terms of ensuring proper policing initiatives. We can go to the next slide, please. That's the end of our presentation. I don't know if there are questions. We can come up. We are there to answer them. The last thing that I want to say, colleagues, is if we work together as a team, like I indicated yesterday, if we work together as a team, we have to look at saying what is it that we want to contribute towards the safety of our own communities, towards our own safety, and towards ensuring economic development in our country. It is good for people to say during COVID, I'll stay at home and I'll have time to do whatever I want to do at home, privately, and all those things. But what I think is most important is for us to say, what is it that I can contribute to build a legacy for our country? What is it that I can do to ensure that our grandchildren will always say, my grandfather contributed toward this, because people have informed me that they contributed towards ensuring that there is safety and security within our country. And not only safety and security, but there is service delivery, that's one. Two, there is economic development, so that tomorrow when they sit down, they don't suffer the way that we did. We don't look back, we learn from the past, but we plan for the future. So it is very important for us, colleagues, all of us, to build a legacy so that when we sit at home during our pension years, we are able to say, yes, we have contributed towards this and we build a legacy for our own country to be able to compete with other first world countries. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Brigadier. Brigadier, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Then we can continue. Thank you, Basil.
Yeah, thanks, Brigadier. Thanks for your time and your participation there. Clearly, I think and I don't necessarily think that it's fair to put you on the spot, but the further we engage, you will find a commonality from the industry's point of view, that there's a disconnect at the high level of the various joints and jocks down towards the ground where is most of the operational detail residing. So, but I'm glad to hear that you're taking this down to district jock level, because we certainly need that. Because that's our first port of call within the district, our first reach out to the relationships and the people there. I hear you say that you, as part of your daily policing, have the NTA and the NLTA grouped under those regulations and legislations. And I'm really excited that you have an MOU with the NDOT, because in our interactions with the NDOT, we don't kind of get that sense. We always pointed in different directions. So we're looking forward to your continued engagement and involvement here to give us access to all your structures and help us in taking this integration forward with communication and then ultimately with accountability. But thank you very much for your presentation.
Basil, could you switch on your video
Harry?
for a second, please? Just switch on your video for a second.
And 100%, got you.
Thank you. And if we can get Obakilwe to switch on his video. All right, now we can continue with the panel discussion. Tabelo, can you switch on your video?
Is that okay, Harry? Is that okay, Harry?
Tabelo, can you hear us?
I can hear you, but I can hear you, but
okay, let me see.
Yeah, we got you, Tabelo. Right. Yeah, I've got Tabelo. Everybody online, Harry.
There we go. All right. Brigadier, you can hear us? Okay, you online. We can hear you as well. So Basil, over to you for the panel discussion. I see there was a hand up, but we lost it again. Oh, Lefoy Molefi, he's got his hand up.
Yeah, it was Lefoy.
Hi, good day again. I've got a question for Obakiwe, but I see he's busy there lunching. I don't know if you'll have time to respond. My question is, with your definition of public transport, you raised a question of saying, is the taxi is part of public transport? Then you said you will elaborate later on, but I don't know if I missed your explanation as to why you raised the question of, is public transport, I mean the taxi is part of the public transport definition. Can you maybe elaborate on that so that you can have a clear understanding how PRASA see taxi industry? Thank you.
Director. Chair, do you want us to take questions one by one, or should we take a round?
On this stage, we've got only this one question related, so you can continue. Thank you, Obakiwe.
Okay. Chair, I preempted this question actually. And as I was listening earlier on, or in one of the presentations, when the issue of taxis and taxi violence directed at other transport modes was highlighted, and I said, no, then I'll be able to deal with this matter thoroughly. One, we have to acknowledge that the taxi industry is not properly regulated. That's the first thing. But secondly, we need to ask ourselves a very difficult question. Since it is historical that they are not properly regulated, or they are not regulated, they are gotten to themselves, in a layman's language. What is it that government is intended to do regarding the taxi industry? It's a challenge that we're sitting with. Now, let's take this issue and connect it within the PRASA setup. I know that I might be crucified, but let's ask ourselves a very logical question. When you destroy the entire transport mode, which is very cheap for our communities, what comes to your mind in terms of your competitors? Who might be the best beneficiary of that criminality? Now, we can't dismiss that and say that we are fighting for a space with a taxi industry that is not regulated in a manner in which we are regulated as PRASA. That's one. But two, who plays oversight role over taxi industry? And what authority does that authority have over a taxi industry? I'm quite sure it becomes a very difficult question to answer. But then it tells you about the level of lawlessness that you find within that particular industry. Now, wouldn't they get involved in making sure that you totally collapse a very efficient and effective mode of transport, which is very cheap to our communities? It becomes a rhetorical question. And that's the reason why I said, and I put it as the last bullet to say, there is that particular lack of clarity as to whether we are dealing with a taxi industry as part of our public transport system. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kilwe. There's a question on YouTube. How would and should third-party access to the rail system assist in preventing crime on the rail system? It's asked by Kobe Hyman.
The third-party access, we have been receiving a number of expression of interest, whether it's coming from NPOs, NGOs, or formalized business, in terms of how they are willing to assist and how can they assist. And I'm quite sure any other responsible South African who's got the interest of our critical infrastructure at heart would be willing to assist wherever is possible. And therefore, the doors of PRASA are open to such suggestions. We won't be able to defeat or get back our trains on rail, working in isolation or on our own. We might be running out of ideas, but with the experts all over South Africa, we will be able to defeat the current crisis that you are sitting with. It's an organized crime syndicate. It's very complicated. What other solutions can we bring on board in terms of dealing with those? Now, I'm quite sure PRASA's doors are open to any engagement, whether it's unsolicited or solicited inputs. PRASA will be willing to listen to that. Thanks, Chair.
Chair, may I make an input at this stage? If there are, as we are waiting for other questions.
Thank you, Tabelo. You're welcome.
Yeah, Chair, thank you very much. Look, first and foremost, there is this reference to the taxi industry. We see it as part of community constituency. In fact, it's a coalition member of the FSCC, actually. And of course, we didn't have a speaker for the taxi industry today, but there was plans to have someone to speak for them. But at the same time, what I'd like to highlight here is the fact that I'm very excited to hear Ubakilwe speaking about matters related to the community policing forums in Acacia, for instance, as I heard him speaking. And also the brigadier was, alluded to links with community policing forums. And we must say that the critical question is, in what way are these forums supported and funded? I'll leave that as a question because perhaps there is information that one can be exposed to, but overall, we have known, even from my own time personally, when I acted in the community policing forums, there was minimal or no funding available, and that was a very, 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 very important problem. I'm aware that there has been movement over the years, and today you do find CPFs having offices located inside police stations. That's good, but I have no doubt in my mind there is more that has to be done. Secondly, coming back to the question of the taxis, we also made some very, very interesting remarks a little earlier. But colleagues, let us just be fair to ourselves. This constant reference to the fact that the taxi industry is not regulated, it is actually a shame to all of us. Because in 1981, 40 years ago, a commission called the Welgemoed Commission was set up to look into the question of regulation and so on. And in fact, at that time, the view was to destroy the taxi industry. And that did not happen. Of course, since '94, the attitude has been different and seeking to create some measure of accommodation. But we are not doing it as rapidly as it should be. And further, some of us are not convinced that there is sufficient consultation, even with the community constituency. Because, for instance, as Ubakilwe raises the figures in Mabopane, why would people want to pay so much more when, in fact, the rail option would cost 71 Rand less? Certainly, some of the answers were also alluded to here in the same webinar today, that it's not a question of looking at the cost of the fare from Mabopane station into Pretoria. You have to look at a whole range of other factors which then makes the commuter to want to pay more. For instance, the distance between traveling from home to Mabopane station and from Pretoria station or whatever station to wherever they work, that has got additional costs. But we will only be looking at the fare from Mabopane station to Pretoria. And that means we are looking at a skewed picture. And so at the end of the day, the point is, we seem to be picking and selecting certain facts according to how they suit the position that we want to advance. I'm afraid there is far much more that we have to do, and far much more that we have to do in terms of also bringing into the equation the communities themselves, because those of us who are old enough to know that the struggle in South Africa was not just about having a government in place. It was also to have a government of the people, with the people, for the people. And when the people are not part of that governing process, that has to result into some of what we have today. Thank you, Chair. Not intending to do another presentation.
Thank you, Tebelo. We appreciate that. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got Vuji, whose hand is up. Vuji.
Thank you very much, Harry. I think I just want to respond to. I actually thought I was going to not take part in this conversation with regards to whether the taxi industry is actually a public transport mode or not. But I think I'm just going to go back and start by definition. By definition, public transport is a form of transportation that is available to the public, that charges set fares and runs fixed routes. Now, I think in agreement with Tebelo, to then look at that and look at how the taxi industry operates and say it's not regulated would be a fallacy, because there are those set regulations that the taxi industry adheres to. We call them taxi operators because they have to acquire an operating license for them to operate their vehicle. This does not disregard the fact that there are illegal operations that take place in the taxi industry, but at large, the 132,000 individual operators who run their vehicles that make up the minibus taxi industry in South Africa are business people who invest in assets unsubsidized, unfinanced by the government, and they actually provide a critical service in moving over 66% of South Africans. Now, if we are going to look at how the taxi industry plays a role and integrates to other modes of transport, it's also important to understand that while our counterparts, such as PRASA, over the years, I mean, for the 2020-2021 financial year, they received 4.7 billion in support from government. Yet, the number of people PRASA moves in the National Household Travel Survey of 2019, the one that was published in 2020, suggests that it has decreased from 1.4 million to over 500,000 commuters. Where did those commuters go? Some of them moved to the bus, some of them moved to the taxi, some of them are unfortunately unemployed. Now, it's quite unfortunate that my colleague would make or allude to the fact that the taxi industry should not be regarded as a public transport mode. Because if the taxi industry was not there to absorb the public transport need of our community, unsubsidized, where would our public transport sector be? I think that is just something that we always need to consider. And I think when we want to start thinking and moving towards integration, the conversations should be around how do we capacitate the formalization of the taxi industry so that there can be integration of the taxi industry to the other modes of transport. For instance, if you are looking at the West Rand taxi rank, it operates it is situated at a taxi at a train station. Could there be room for integration where the taxi industry actually does not compete with PRASA, but provides a feeder service so that PRASA can then have more commuters that are brought to the station by the taxi? I think if we start having those conversations, we are going to see a lot more engagement, positive engagement from the taxi industry. I think I'll leave it there, Harry. Thank you.
Thank you, Uji. I appreciate that and very relevant comments.
Thanks.
Thank you for that. We've got
Thanks, folks.
Molefe. Brigadier, can hear you.
Okay. Thank you very much. In terms of CPFs, there is a legislation that's dealing with CPFs, and remember we are having those joint operations with CPFs. Although they don't have arresting powers themselves. The purpose of community policing forums is to help the police with information and also assist in terms of those establishments of street communities and various community patrolling units within our communities, so that we are able to police ourselves. I think you will all remember, those that know that previously we had what we called neighborhood watches. Those neighborhood watches were not having arresting powers, but they were very powerful in terms of saying, if you move in our street and we don't know you, then we will either stop you there and then call the police and say, we don't know this guy, we don't know what he wants, all those other issues. But since community policing forums were legislated, they are the body that recognized by government to assist in terms of dealing with these issues. They can bring information and say, we have this challenge here, we want the police to come and conduct operations there. We will definitely assist them in terms of that. And again, they are getting assistance, a lot of assistance from government. If, for an example, their committee members are going to meetings, they'll get transported to and from the meetings, various meetings, and there are also other engagements in terms of dealing with that. Previously, they were funded from the government, and they are looking again at that in terms, because the funding was stopped due to a lot of maladministration that was taking place around there. So the government is really looking at the funding of CPFs to see as to whether they will be sponsored through equipment or whatever, but funds are sitting on that. The businesses were also funding the CPFs because they were playing a big role in terms of ensuring safety within various communities. And we are encouraging our various role players to say the CPF is not only a police issue. It's an issue that involves the whole communities, be it business, civil society, or whatever, but it involves everybody. So if there is any business that wants to sponsor CPFs with maybe a vehicle or whatever, then in all their operations, they know that they have to get one police officer with them so that their actions are legal at all times. But all in all, we really thank people who are participating in CPFs, because it closes the gap between the police and the community itself in terms of ensuring responsibility from both ends. It is of vital importance that we keep this going and improve on the relationships that are there going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brigadier. Much appreciate for those closing comments. I know we've got Lefoy, we're running out of time. We've got Lefoy Molefe. Do you quickly want to ask your question?
Okay, thank you, Harry. It's more of a comment that I want to make in terms of this topic of public transport violence, because I heard that Ntate said he was supposed, the taxi people or drivers, they were supposed to be part of this discussion. So I think if we are discussing the public transport violence without the taxi industry, we are not doing justice to this discussion or a debate, because I think they are in the center of public transport, because according to VUI, they transport 66% of passengers. So they've got a bigger role to play in terms of public transport. And I think Santago, as maybe their mother body or something, they must come to this platform in terms of saying, how are they going to integrate or link up with other public transport operators? Because at the end of the day, every operator's got an obligation towards the passengers of our country. So I think in future, they must avail themselves so that they can also be part of this, because I think they are very important stakeholders when it comes to public transport violence, and not only how they relate to other stakeholders within themselves also, because their internal violence or squabbles, they tend to have an impact on passengers. So I think in future they must be part of this forum so that they can also come and have their voice heard, and so that everyone can know what are their strategies or plans in terms of their internal violence and how they relate with other role players. Thank you.
Thank you, Boy. That's very important, and we've taken note of that. Thank you very much for that. Ladies and gents, I see there are a few hands up, but unfortunately we ran out of time. Basil did share his email address in the chat room, where you kindly can share your comments and your feedback, so that Basil said you will follow it up. So please have a look in the chat room for Basil's email address and send your comments and your questions to Basil. We really appreciate that. But right, so maybe can we have some closing comments, or Bakilwe, maybe from you, closing remarks? They seem to know Bakilwe is not on the call anymore. Tabelo, some closing remarks from you?
My apologies, Harry. I also had a little glitch in terms of a power cut, and I missed out on especially some of what we were saying. Just in closing remarks, thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this webinar, and I regret that we were unable to be joined by the representatives of taxi drivers that we believed should have joined us. And Basil, speaking for myself on an unmandated basis, I agree with you 100% in terms of the strategy proposal that you put forward. I think it can really bring about a difference, and also I share the views presented by Vui in terms of the institutional void that she referred to, yes, she uses words like bullying of the taxi industry and so on. But really, yes, it's not that she is incorrect, but she also uses a very, very, very interesting perspective, saying a child that does not feel the warmth of a village will bend the village, and I think that's precisely where we are, and I couldn't agree with her more, and so finally, really, it's just a great pity that while we have high crime levels in the country, and there is a lot that has to be looked at as incidents of crime, but we want to put forward the view that we need to balance this really. While it is a crime purely as Ubakile says, but there is also the issues of the socio-economic conditions in our country, the absence of the credible voices that have to be heard in very critical areas. For instance, I heard the other day a Labour representative talking about how in Cape Town you find a dedicated bus lane to take commuters into the city, but unfortunately that bus lane becomes operational for them to get into work in the morning. But in terms of going back home, you don't have any such dedicated lanes, and whether or not it takes them a long time to reach home, that's not longer the issue. The issue is for them to arrive at work quickly and on time. And the same applies, we can go on and on. There is in Pretoria, I actually don't live in Pretoria, but one is exposed to some of these issues. For instance, the road that goes into Kwandebele has claimed lots of lives over the years, and it's a matter that is not attended to, and so on. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. Before I thank you, get carried away.
No problem. Thanks, Tebello. Harry, can I do a wrap?
Yes, please, Basil, will appreciate that.
I think it's only prudent for me to thank everybody, both participants, panelists, and all the attendees. Apologies, and thanks for indulging us in the extended time. But as I kicked off this morning, I said at the introduction, this is a discussion that directly affects public transport. Not one sector, not an isolated sector, it affects public transport. But I think more importantly, it affects and influences a broader stakeholder base. That's why I had invited all of you. So it includes labor, users, community at large, and all the government departments. So today was necessary to engage. We were never going to all come out of this harmoniously, as Tebello said. We will leave this place still disagreeing with some of the things that we might have agreed up front. But at least it started a process of collaborative civility, and it has initiated the discussion. So the next steps, violence and destruction is not good under any circumstances, but when it damages an already constrained and complex transport system, it's going to set us back years. Let's try and avoid losing years. Let's try and claw back some of those years. So I think it's set a base for good constructive dialogue around a possible policy or flexing any existing policies that exist. And through Sabawa and through the panelists, I'll arrange for a discussion document base, but please do send all your comments in so we can incorporate it. And we'll set up a way forward and I'll communicate accordingly. So as long as everybody's got the energy to make this positive change, we'll facilitate the dialogue and the process going forward. Harry, thanks to you and Transport Forum again, and for allowing us to be on your platform. Just a reminder to everybody, as I flow through from this event, on the 1st of July, we are facilitating something that ties in as a post-process. It's the event that deals with risk and insurance and the impacts and effects of not constantly reviewing or flow through from any losses arising from violence and destruction. It's got quite a professional lineup of speakers that talks to the risk and finance impacts within the public transport space or the transport space, say. So, thank you, everybody. And thanks, Harry. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Basil. Thank you, Sabawa, for hosting us today and playing a major role in putting this together. We really appreciate that. We're looking forward to the 1st of July, being hosted by Sabawa again. We're really looking forward to that. We also have next week, Thursday, event where we're talking about improving supply chain in terms of strategies and also about the World Bank report on our ports. We're going to discuss that. It's going to be very interesting. So we hope to see you guys there as well. So thank you very much to all the panelists, and we're giving a big hand to our panelists and our sponsors. We really appreciate that, and have a blessed day further. We look forward to seeing you guys again soon. Thank you very much.